It's the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman, a great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. Welcome to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Great to have your company with you all the way until 1 o'clock today. And whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio, on your smart speaker, whether you're watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it is, as always, very fabulous to have your company. Lots to talk about today. We are going to be talking about, world events, tariffs. I get that. We are going to be talking about that. Of course we are. But I want to talk about stuff more local as well today. I want to talk about the Labour Party just trying to really quietly on the last day of parliamentary term before the Easter recess, just ever so quietly announcing they're dropping plans for 5 local grooming gang inquiries. I don't know why they thought they'd get away with it. Did they think we'd all forgotten? Obviously they did. But the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, pledged back in January very clearly. They said they wouldn't have a national public inquiry. Everyone claimed we'd already had one into grooming gangs. We didn't. There were 5 days of evidence on actual grooming gangs, and it largely concerned only one town, Rochdale, anyway. But Yvette Cooper got browbeaten after this uproar, after Elon Musk got involved, to providing £5 million of government money for 5 judge-led local inquiries. One was in Oldham, the other 4 yet to be named. But it was going to be local inquiries, and they were going to get advice from the man who led previous inquiries. On the final day, I say, before Parliament broke up, so not in session today, before they've gone to the Easter holiday, Jess Phillips, whose job is, by the way, she's Minister for Safeguarding and for Violence Against Women and Children, a woman who has genuinely campaigned for many, many years to safeguard women and girls from violence. She's done a valiant job, the backbench. Whether you like her or loathe her, vote for her or not vote for her, she has done a great job on that, until she got into government. And I don't know how she was able to sit there while her opposite number, Tory MP Katie Lamb, outlined in the most excruciating, horrific detail some of the crimes that are committed against young girls by grooming gangs in this country, and no action taken. She sat there looking a bit bored, frankly, looking a bit bored. Oh, got to book my Easter holiday with my kids. I haven't got time to listen to what has been happening in terms of the most foul, disgusting brutality and sexual violence inflicted on children in this country. But instead of that £5 million for 5 judge-led local inquiries, the government says it's now going to take a flexible approach, which is code for sweep it under the carpet. They're now offering councils alternative options, such as local panels and audits. Why won't this work? Well, I'll tell you why this won't work. It won't work because it was local government, local police, local authorities, local care home staff, local social workers who allowed this to happen in the first place. They watched as this happened again and again and again to thousands of young girls. And why did they do that? Well, we all know the answer to that, don't we? Because the victims were white, working class girls, and the perpetrators largely were men from the Pakistani community. And my God, we mustn't say that out loud, must we? And my God, we've got to make sure that we keep community cohesion, don't we? So why is it less than a month before the local elections, where Labour is defending an awful lot of seats in awful lot of areas, why is it that the Labour government would decide to drop a plan for judge-led local inquiries, largely in Labour areas where large numbers of Pakistani grooming gangs were not only able to perpetrate those crimes, they were in some cases protected, able to continue their crimes, enabled by local authorities and others? Is it because they're afraid of a backlash from the local communities they're so worried about? Is it because they really think that judge-led inquiry won't teach us anything, we're better off having these local panels? This is about, once again, and what happened over 20-odd years, this is about politicians putting politics, putting their party, their jobs ahead of the lives and the safety of young girls. It is as simple as that. Jess Phillips, I know you follow me on social media. You should be ashamed of yourself. You have done a really good job over the years as a backbench MP speaking out on tackling this issue. And yesterday, you failed. Not just yourself, not just your government, not just your party. You failed the young girls of this country who rely on ministers like you to help protect them. I am ashamed of you. You should be ashamed of yourself. And sitting there while your opposite number laid out in gruesome detail what some of these victims have gone through, and sitting there looking bored, almost yawning, it felt like on occasion, rolling your eyes, is really not going to fly with the rest of us. I want to hear your thoughts on this, because I'm really appalled at this. I'm not surprised. I got to be honest with you, I'm not surprised by this. I mean, it was a Labour cover-up all along. This is absolutely party political. This stuff was happening in areas which were largely, large Muslim populations where and Muslim Pakistani gangs were able to act because they were protected by basically local community leaders. That's what happened. That is what happened, and it's what's happening right now. It's not something that happened in the past in a few places. It's happening in probably 50 towns and cities across our country, and it's happening right now. And if we're not going to find out how this happens and how it's not prevented and how it's not stopped and how we can't stop it from happening in the future, then this government is a waste of space. I want to hear your reaction to the news that those 5 local grooming gang inquiries have been basically, dropped. You can spend the money on anything you want. We know it'll probably go on rainbow sodding crossings, won't it, to promote community cohesion. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can also get in touch on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs 1 standard network rate message. We are also going to be talking about, tariffs and what's happened there. Massive big news overnight. Also, those bin strikes in Birmingham and how they could spread to many other areas, including Brighton, Sheffield, Barnet and elsewhere, because of those equal pay disputes that have led to lots of councils getting into financial difficulty. All that coming up. We're not going to ignore the big issue out there. But Claire Pearsall is joining me. She's a former Conservative government advisor. So appreciate you joining us today. I do think the thing about that tariff story is that's massively affecting the globe. It's massively affecting the global economy. It's going to affect politics for years to come. It massively is going to impact this country. People who think it's not, crazy. It's going to massively impact that. But here's the thing. Most people put safety of children ahead of, in their list of priorities, ahead of, being better off and worrying about costs. Mm-hmm. Cost of living is a very, very important issue. But for most normal people, worrying about children's safety, your own or another child, is more important than the cost of living, which is why I want to lead on this rather than the tariffs. Where are you on this? Because, the Tories didn't do enough on this either, but this has been a problem in Labour councils largely, hasn't it?
It has, and I think what we're seeing now is the Labour government bowing down to those councils. Apparently they went out to consult the councils and ask for their feedback, and strangely the council said, we don't need an inquiry. It's absolutely fine, don't worry about us, so, you know, we'll have a look at it. It's appalling. It is absolutely appalling. Those girls who were victims of these awful rape gangs aren't going to get the justice they need.
No, they really aren't. And again, there's all this stuff about we need to talk more about it. It's like, we know what happened.
Yeah.
We also know how it was allowed to continue to happen. But again, no one is pretending that sexual assault and rape of young girls and boys in this country doesn't happen from white perpetrators, black perpetrators, any other religion, that's not the point. It wasn't that those are the only people committing any of these crimes. This particular modus operandi of the grooming gangs, the way they tackled these girls from care and from homes where they were neglected. This was particularly done in this particular time. But the key thing about this was it was allowed to continue, not because no one knew about it. It was allowed to continue because people, the police, the local authorities, social services, care home, you name it, everybody. MPs who did raise it, their careers were over. So political parties, everyone wanted to keep quiet about it. They shut it down because of community cohesion. I don't want cohesion in a community if part of that community, of what any colour or any religion, is raping and sodomising young girls. Call me old-fashioned, call me a prude, but maybe that's not the people I want to have social cohesion with. And again, I still think we do have an issue where we really do need these. We hear so much about Muslim community leaders. Be nice if there was some speaking out on this issue at some point. I've never ever expected because you're Catholic you have to speak out against the IOA. I'm an atheist. I don't have to speak out in defence, to condemn any act by any of the atheists. But when it's people in your own local community and it's been covered up by people in your local community, do you not think you might want to speak out if you are supposedly a leader in that community? Not ordinary people, a leader in that community. It utterly defies belief. It really does. I want to play, before we go on, we're going to talk about tariffs as well. I want to play a quick clip from Katie Lamb. Now, she is a Shadow Home Office Minister. She's a Tory MP. She spoke in Parliament yesterday. This video's gone viral. And she spoke out about, why we do need investigations into the local authorities and why, therefore, we can't have the local authorities doing the investigating. Let's have a watch and listen of what she had to say.
Why have ministers refused to establish a dedicated unit in the National Crime Agency to investigate councillors and officials accused of collusion and corruption? And I am sorry to say that unit, Mr. Speaker, must also investigate police officers. In one case, the father of an abuse victim in Rotherham was arrested by South Yorkshire Police when he attempted to rescue his daughter from her abusers. He was detained twice in one night while, on the very same evening, his daughter was repeatedly assaulted and abused by a gang of men. It is clear these criminals were unafraid of law enforcement. In Kirklees, Judge Marson said, "You were seen with your victim on at least 3 occasions by the police. None of that deterred you, and you continued to rape her." How, without a national inquiry, can we know how and why these monsters enjoyed effective immunity for so long? And how can we be sure it will not happen again?
All very pertinent questions, are they not? Let's have another listen to a slightly shorter clip this time about, just about what actually happened to some of these girls.
The girls we are talking about, Mr. Speaker, are predominantly white. The men who preyed on them were predominantly Muslim, generally either from Pakistan or of Pakistani heritage. One of the victims from Dewsbury was told by her rapist, I quote, "We're here to all the white girls and the government." Will the minister accept that, in many cases, these crimes were racially and religiously aggravated? How, without a national inquiry, can we understand what part these factors played?
I mean, you can't argue with any of that, can you, Claire?
No, you absolutely can't. And I listened to that live yesterday. And
you were in Parliament.
I was in Parliament. I listened to it, and you cannot understand why the Home Office Minister, the government minister, sat there as disinterested when all of those details were revealed.
Yeah,
again.
I mean, I was absolutely appalled when sometimes the camera panned back to just Philip's face. It's just shocking. I want to hear your thoughts. Get in touch. Just what is your reaction? They pledged to do it. They were drag kicking and screaming into an inquiry. There has never been a full inquiry into this. I don't want something that lasts 10 years. We know what happened. We know what happened. What we need to do is get some names. I want all the victims, like, literally come forward, name all your perpetrators. Not these are going to court, but you know, and I want every police officer, every social worker that you told, and I want you to go to those social workers, go to those police officers or local councillors, and I want them to question, who did you go to? Do you have a record of you going and saying, I want action on this, and we need to do something, and you being told, be quiet, go away, or your job's at risk, or whatever. I want that full way, and I want every single person, where the buck stops, I want them prosecuted. I want them prosecuted. It's simple as that. Tax me, build the extra prison. I want those people behind bars. These people are a danger to us. And a lot of this, by the way, was also, you know, those white, you know, liberal, hand-wringing do-gooders. Oh, well, we don't want to upset community relations by exposing the fact that these men are doing this. It is genuinely shocking to me that people can do this, but they do, and that people cover it up as well. On one level, is more shocking to me. It's bizarre. Look, I do get in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. 87222 is the number to text. You can get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1. Standard network rate. Message. Let's also just talk about, before we go to a break, we're going to talk about tariffs as well, because it's huge. So we had a bunch of tariffs that we were announced last Thursday. They all kicked in on Saturday. We're among the 10% base rate of tariffs. The extra rates, the 20% for the EU, the 104% now because of retaliation against retaliation from China. That hit him in the early hours of this morning. 60 of what Donald Trump called the worst offending countries. Those tariffs all kicked in because Beijing has retaliated with matching the 34% they were facing. They've been hit with another 50%, so some of their goods more than doubled in terms of tariffs. So, you know, you buy this item from China, it's going to be double the price because they're not going to be able to absorb, the people supplying that, they're not going to be able to absorb that extra cost. We've also got, Labour Labour government here trying to sort of just like stay calm, let's try and get a free trade deal. Donald Trump says they've been inundated with calls, some 70 countries have been in touch. What would you be doing if you were in government now?
I think I'd start to be a little bit more noisy. I thought the softly approach was good to begin with, but now, considering how damaging this is going to be to our economy, I think we need to start getting a little bit more bolshy. And it does seem that that's what President Trump does do better with.
Bolshy, you just get, China is the second biggest economy in the world and they've been slapped with these tariffs. Aren't we better off sticking with the 10%? We're in the bottom range of those tariffs.
But I don't think that 104% is going to last. I really don't. I think this is part of the process and this is what Trump enjoys. It is that whole business, play hardball, see what you can get in return, and they will come to something that is going to be much better.
There's some, in terms of like Chinese and US trade is just huge. They are the two big economies in the world. It comes up to £429 billion last year, trade between those two countries. US imports, of course it does, far more from China, about $440 billion. China imports from America, which is about $145 billion. Now, this is the thing. Constantly, Donald Trump is like, you're exploiting us. No, you're a very rich country. You can afford to buy all these goods from our country, it's a big country, but it's got a lot of people. A lot of people in China are not very well off in the same way that Americans are. But the biggest exports from China to the US, electronics, smartphones, laptops, telecoms, toys, batteries for electric vehicles and things like that. Biggest export from the US to China, can you guess what it is? It's soybeans to feed their pigs. And who knew? But I would not have had that in a multiple choice test. But I think we're learning a lot about international trade. It's fascinating. We've also got a battle between Donald Trump's closest advisors. Elon Musk has branded Donald Trump's trade czar. This is Peter Navarro, his senior counsellor for trade. He's branded him dumber than a sack of bricks. This is after claims from this Navarro guy that Elon Musk is a car assembler rather than a car manufacturer because he's saying he's importing all the parts. Actually, he's one of the top 4 car manufacturers in the US. They've basically been having a go at each other. Elon Musk actually called the trade expert Peter Navarro Peter Retardo. This is not grown-up stuff. No. Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary yesterday, who's got a young child of her own, she sought to downplay the infighting, claiming that boys will be boys. And we'll let their public sparring continue. This is a very public spat, but there is clearly a lot of dispute going on within the White House about what Donald Trump is doing right now.
And I think that was going to be inevitable. When you have a businessman like Elon Musk, he does understand what's going on in the world. He does understand what these tariffs are going to do. So for it to degenerate into playground name-calling, I think is unfortunate at best. But do you know what? This is how American politics is going to be, I'm afraid. Yep. People are going to call out those decisions being made by people.
Another 4 years of this, folks. Another 4 years of this. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all the topics we're talking about today. And I also want to talk about bin collections because, absolutely, I mean, I do not know how people in Birmingham are coping with what's going on there with the just streets piled up with rotting bins. It's been warm weather as well. It's going to get warm at the weekend. This is going to get much, much worse. And now there's talk that it could actually spread and we could actually see those bin strikes spreading to sort of 6 other areas of the country. This is a big concern, isn't it? I mean, do we need, again, is it one of those ones where we need to send in the army? I don't know. I don't think people should be expected to live like this. We're going to have disease. We've got rats and God knows what already.
Surely this is a health crisis now waiting to happen because the weather has been warm. The rain will come because this is the UK in springtime.
You've met us.
Yes. So it's going to be damp and warm and nasty, and you can just see that is going to get out of hand, and there are going to be maggots and there are going to be all sorts of nasty diseases.
I find it bad enough just in my house. We've got 9 flats in our building, and literally you get people who don't sort of seal up the plastic. I could do hours on this. They don't seal it up, and it's like, can you please? It's the middle of summer. Bins, the rubbish bins are only collected every 2 weeks. For the love of God, seal your bags up. I mean, I've once had to clean out those big wheelie bins.
It's
the maggots.
Horrible. It's vile. It is absolutely vile.
And this is happening. This is literally piled up in your street all day, every day, 4 weeks on end. It's untenable. It's absolutely untenable. It shouldn't. I realise the bin collectors don't want to take a cut, but someone's got to bang some heads together here. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. If you're in Birmingham, do get in touch. 0344 499 1000. How are you coping? 10:22 is the time. Lots of calls already on the board, as you can understand, on the grooming gangs issue. Do get in touch on that. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Just a few weeks after the transplant, the uterus was healthy enough that the patient actually had a period, and she conceived on her first cycle of IVF when the embryo was implanted. So you can't have natural conception after uterine transplantation. When pregnancies occur, they occur after IVF.
Okay.
And you can see there with that magnificent picture of the team from all around celebrating the joy that their work is finally complete with the baby that came into the world 6 weeks ago.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Claire Pearsall is here. If you're watching us on the YouTube, you'll notice we've come as twins today. We're both in our sky blue. I was going to say we'd be matching the beautiful blue sky out the window, but on the 17th floor of Talk Towers. But no, we both have to be in grey today. School holidays, Easter holidays, isn't it? No, it's going to get nicer later in the week. Let's keep the blue sky cheer in our dresses at least. Anyway, let's get straight to your phone calls, because this is not a cheery topic to talk about. And this is the Labour government dropping its plans for 5 local grooming gang inquiries, despite a pledge by the Home Secretary only in January for £5 million for 5 judge-led local inquiries. But we all just sneaked out a little announcement yesterday, just outrageously saying, watering it all down. Let's talk to Dave. He's on the Isle of Wight and wants to get in touch. Very good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Good morning. What do you make of this?
Well, first and foremost, I have to say, I think, I can't remember the MP's name.
Katie
She's shown her true... Jess Phillips, sorry.
Oh, Jess Phillips, yeah.
She's shown her true colours on this, I'm afraid. She may have done some wonderful things in the past, but now she's in government. She's an absolute disgrace.
And this is the thing. It's easy to sort of... Not easy. I mean, she's done some great work, but she never had to give anything up. It was like, this was her thing. She was a campaigner on this issue. I mean, she herself has been a victim of sexual violence, she's talked about. But this is the thing. It's just like... So when there's a cost... When there is, oh, well, actually, this might not go down well in some local communities where Labour is fighting council by-elections, you want to drop it. Well, and then you drop it. Well, then it's not a principle, is it? Then it's not anything you believe in.
I mean, Labour Party, I think, are just protecting their voters. And the majority, I believe, are, like in Birmingham, Pakistani Muslim grooming gangs, vote Labour. And they're just protecting their voter base. I just think these are children who have gone through the cruelest of crimes. I mean, I can give you a timeline of one of these children. They obviously go through the crime, then they go through the shame, the guilt, then it leads to drugs and drink, then it leads to crime, then it leads to things like depression, suicidal thoughts. Yeah. And so it's not just the initial act. No,
exactly. Well, it's not one-off, and often they're plied with the drink and drugs to get them to go, and they carry on with the drink and drugs because how else would you cope with that? And they're threatened if they don't agree to even worse violence, or their younger sister being taken on by the grooming gangs as well. And what would you do in that scenario? But also, a lot of these cases, they were never prosecuted because well, the girls weren't credible because they were drug addicts. Well, you know what? If someone was doing that to me at the age of 13 every Saturday night, I'd be a drug addict too.
Absolutely. I mean, there are... I mean, there's evidence that police are involved in covering up. I mean, there are MPs, there are government ministers...
local councillors.
Not just covering up, actually involved in the rape of innocent children. And it's also a race hate crime, let's be honest. It's not just a rape crime.
They were chosen because they were white. They had no worth. They were nothing. They were scum. They were white girls.
Yes, I mean, it just comes across Labour are the party to protect paedophiles, grooming gangs. They, in my opinion, they are nothing more than a bunch of pathological liars.
Yeah, and again, I want everyone of any background. If you commit a crime against a young boy or girl, I want them prosecuted. I couldn't care less what your colour is, what your ethnicity is, what your background is, what your religion is. But the point is, they were not prosecuted because of those things, and that's the key thing. Dave, I couldn't agree with you. I think Jess, as I said earlier, I think she's an absolute disgrace as well. Ian is on the line. He's in London. Hello, Ian.
Hello. Julia, hold on, putting the phone to my ear. Right.
Good, that always works. You've worked out how phones work. That's a good start.
No, it was just taking it off a speaker, putting it
All
on
right, then.
the phone. Right, Julia, let's look at this week. Yep. We're on Wednesday. What happened on Monday? Monday, you had 70 plus Labour MPs getting up and backing the 2 MPs that were thrown out of Israel because they went there. Correct?
Yep.
Right? How many of those Labour MPs that stood up there and were backing it and everything else come from areas where all this grooming is going on?
Yeah. Yeah, right? I bet there's a lot of overlap there.
Every single one of them. You've had the Health Secretary, West Streeting, is standing up there. It's all going on in his area.
Yeah.
Right? The Mayor of London doesn't want to know. Why? Because they're on the gravy train.
Well, I just think it's that political thing. They're just sort of like, you're just going to be upsetting your own local communities you want to vote for you, and local councillors, and it's just any inquiry ain't going to work out well for Labour because it's not exclusively, but it's been largely happening on a grand scale and being covered up on a grand scale in Labour communities.
Yeah, but it's not only the power that they get by being elected, it's what comes with the power.
Yeah.
Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts the most. And that's what's going on with this mob. They really do not. This majority they've got, they just think they can get away with blue murder, and it's going to carry on and on and on.
Yeah, it is just absolutely appalling. It really is. Ian, thank you for your call. Appreciate that. Claire Pearsall is still with me. Claire, we're very pleased. We're going to be talking to the Tory MP who made those extraordinary in comments in the Commons yesterday. I mean, there wasn't actually anything new in what she said, Katie Lamb, but it was just so powerfully put. And seeing the reaction of the minister who just made the announcement, I think, was very, very, very telling. But I mean, how much do you think this is a political issue now?
It's hugely political.
It really shouldn't be, should it?
It shouldn't be at all. We should all be concerned about children and vulnerable young adults being cared for. Yeah. But this is a very political issue. A lot of people didn't want to upset parts of the community. I'm sorry, I don't care, like you said, what colour, creed, religion, race you are. If you've done bad things, you're a bad person.
It was being carried out by people in my own family, I'd still want it prosecuted and stopped. I mean, I don't even understand why that's even up for debate for anybody.
No.
I think it is utterly bewildering, but the fact that it's happening on such a grand scale, it's not just a few bad people, and it's not. And I think in lots of ways, the cover-up, the people willing to cover up and allow it to continue to happen, are almost worse than the animals committing those crimes because they know better.
Well, they are. They're just as culpable because they've covered it up.
Absolutely. Again, until they're prosecuted, we're not going to get them prosecuted until we have a proper inquiry. We actually learn how it happened, and we're not going to stop it because it's happening today, right now, today. This is happening to girls in Britain, across Britain, and to thousands of them. It's happening today, and if we're not going to stop that from happening today, what's the point of even being in government if you're not trying to stop that? I mean, for goodness sake. I mean, I want my bins collected, but I think I prioritise girls being protected from rape. Again,
a basic line, isn't it?
Just basic stuff, isn't it? Anyway, 10:32 is time. Up next, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to talk to Serena Duncan-Smith. We're also going to be talking to a local councillor in Birmingham about those bin strikes and why they might spread elsewhere. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer, my twin in the same dress, basically. Claire Pearsall is also here with the Blue Girls today, former Conservative Government Advisor. So I'd like to say that extraordinary speech from Katie Lamb, the Tory Shadow Home Office Minister, that we played you a little bit earlier, just a little snippet of that. It was quite a lengthy speech. I mean, most of it, frankly, we can't play out because she's going through the gruesome details of what happened to some of these girls in the grooming gang. So can't play a lot. I mean, it would just be beep, 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 the whole thing. She's able to do it in Parliament. And all credit to her saying we can't look away. She's going to give her first interview about that at midday. We're going to be talking to her at midday here on Talk, so very much look forward to seeing her. Right now, let's talk to Conservative MP and former Conservative Party leader Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, who joins us now. Very good morning to you, Sir Ian.
Morning.
Lots to talk about today, but I do just want to start just briefly on this grooming gang and this announcement yesterday from Jess Phillips that they're just going to they're just going to sort of drop their plans they announced for these 5 local grooming gang inquiries. And basically, you can get the £5 million, but you can kind of do what you want with it and have a local panel and audit and not have a proper judge-led inquiry. What do you make of that?
Oh well, they're running away from it, and you know that when they put up a more junior minister to make a statement like this at 45 minutes from the end of Parliament before the Easter break. You know, this is right back to the old Labour ways of saying now is a good time to bury bad news, as everybody's leaving Parliament to go away. This is not the time. Then you make an announcement like this. It's so obvious. First of all, it's an abuse of Parliament. It's also an abuse of a really serious issue. Yeah. I am putting down today a Freedom of Information request of the government to tell us what information did they receive from the councils that so made them change their policy. So I'm demanding that they release all of the stuff that came from councils that persuaded them somehow to change from what was already not a particularly strong position to a very weak position.
Yeah, indeed. I imagine even if you did get that information, and even if it was what was officially written, you know as well as I do how these things work. It's a one-on-one private phone call. It's a wink. It's these things are done in a very informal basis.
I agree, but the fact is why I put Freedom of Information down, Julia, because I want to discover how weak was this so-called information. And of course, the government is going to try and avoid it, but at least that way we have the Information Commissioner to rule on this. This is a matter of public policy and therefore should be available to the public. This is a complete reversal. And those poor people, the poor girls particularly, who should be the focus of this, who've been abused systematically by these gangs, many of them ethnic gangs. That may be the reason why they don't want to do this particular review, because there's pressure from inside the party. I don't know. But one way or another, you govern for Britain, not for the instincts of your own party.
Absolutely. Let's talk about things rather more globally, though. We've had a sort of second wave of the Trump tariff war on the world coming into effect in the early hours of this morning. We've already had that 10% tariff on pretty much most of the world coming in on Saturday on all goods. Now it's the other 60 nations roughly who are getting them, and groups like the EU getting those higher tariffs ranging from 11% all the way up to China being hit with 104% tariffs, and that's in response to retaliatory tariffs from China. Of course, initially the retaliatory tariffs from the US. We are looking at a doubling in price of goods going from China to Britain. Now, a lot of people will just say, "What's that got to do with me? I don't live in America. I'm not going to be paying higher goods. What do I care?" What would you say to that?
Well, prices will find their way through to consumers one way or the other on all these goods. So consumers will have to make a choice. Do they buy quite in the quantities that they would have done of things to try and figure out whether these are absolute requirements or whether they're goods that they don't particularly need, and because of the price increase they won't buy them, but they will filter through to consumers. The one thing I will say about these tariffs, I'm not generally in favour of tariffs at all. I consider myself a believer in the free market, which I know has done more to reduce poverty around the world than any other communist or socialist action. But there are, however, problems with the free market if countries systematically abuse it. And in the case of China and Russia and others, you have seen systematic abuse take place where they've basically broken all the rules that are run by the World Trade Organization by getting subsidies from their central bank, which allows some of their businesses to undercut every other commercial business in the world. And of course, they use slave labor, forced labor as well in their supply chain. So it's all well and good. We all want free trade, but I can see what the problem is here is that certain countries are absolutely abusive, and even developed countries have been abusing it by putting secret taxes in, like elements of VAT on particular products they know that are only going to be produced in one country or the other. So there are abuses taking place, and this is really a requirement for a wider scale change to the way we police the free market.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting also. I find it fascinating, the EU being all outraged about tariffs when they impose tariffs on pretty much every country outside the EU. I mean, that's quite
terrible.
They were putting tariffs on us. They wanted it to be more expensive for people to export to our country and import to their country. I mean, they wanted to do that. So I don't know why they're acting so surprised. It does look like they will be imposing some 25% tariffs back, and we are seeing that ratcheting up a bit. Look, in terms of what the impact is going to be on our economy, I was talking about this yesterday actually on the show, that there's a little bit of a get-out clause coming for Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer. I mean, I think the world outlook is going to look worse, but it's actually going to be a nice little get-out clause for her, isn't it? Which is, oh, well, the world economy is doing terribly, that's why we're doing badly, as opposed to as a result of the announcement she made since becoming Chancellor.
Well, she's made it worse. We arrived at the moment of sanctions in a bad place. People shouldn't forget that her abortive budget last year has really hit businesses very hard. I mean, the national insurance hike at the same time as the minimum income. I'm in favour of incomes being at the right level of the base. But when you do both together, that really hits businesses, and more particularly hits part-time workers. So this will have an effect long before and even after any sanctions, any tariffs changes. However, there is one bit of good news for the public on the horizon, which is finally Labour politicians are having to admit that Brexit will be the key to working this one out, and that those who wanted to get closer to Europe will now not want to get quite so close to Europe, because we would have faced a 20+% tariff had we been in the EU. So now we have the scope, and I believe it is wholly feasible for us to negotiate some kind of trade deal with the United States that brings that 10% down to zero.
And indeed negotiate for the best interests of our country based on our production and what the industries, the agriculture that we need to protect, as opposed to the Europe who are negotiating basically on behalf of France and Germany.
Yeah, so hooray for Brexit, because it gives us that scope to do it, which we would not have had we been stuck.
Just one other thing I want to ask you about is front page of the Times today. London has lost 11,300 dollar millionaires in just the past year. We've lost more millionaires to our capital city than Moscow has, bearing in mind they're under economic sanctions during the war. We are no longer one of the top 5 wealthiest cities in the world. We've lost a higher proportion of millionaires than anywhere else. And when we talk about millionaires, we don't mean like they've been sitting on a house that's accumulated value. We're talking about people they've got that in cash. They've got that in their bank accounts, their stocks and shares, their liquid money. And this includes, by the way, a number of 18 people worth more than 100 millions and 2 billionaires. How big an issue is this? Because a lot of people will say, well, if they want to go and pay, lower taxes somewhere else, that's not our problem. But we know the very wealthy pay an inordinate amount of the tax in this country, don't they?
Yes, I'm critical of both governments in this regard. The attack on the non-dom status, which, by the way, we had in place for over 200 years in the UK, which made London a very attractive place for people, A, to set up business, and B, to be here to spend their money. And that's why a lot of London Theatreland does so very well. It's why, the attractions of the, golf courses, the sporting events in the UK are a big draw for people with money who want to be in a country that they consider has good schooling as well, etc., if they can afford to send their kids to it. So the main thing is that we threw all that away. That had been one of the great incentives for wealthy people to be here, and that money was often invested into businesses. So what's actually happened, it started to a lighter degree by the Conservatives. I argued that this was nonsense. And, of course, it's carried on here with Labour.
Yeah, but then there were people like Rishi Sunak's wife, wife of a multimillionaire banker, but also the daughter to an Indian billionaire, living here. Her husband's in government. Her kids are at school here. But saying, well, I'm non-dom. I don't really live here. I'm not, I'm here, but I'm not really here. And I don't want to pay tax on my worldwide income. I think a lot of us, frankly, had very little time for that. I mean, if someone is here for a few years, I can see that. But it doesn't add up for a lot of us.
Julia. There are rules around this, and you should police those rules. But the reality is we've done more than that. We've made this a very unpopular place for people to be who have money now because they get hard hit. And so that money that they would have invested into the UK or spent here
goes elsewhere.
London has now gone to Paris and Milan and other cities who've all adopted the UK's non-dom status that we used to have as a form of practice. So, you know, when you do something like this, you should be conscious of the consequences of what you do.
Yeah.
What you get back is very little. What you lose is enormous.
Yeah, and as we've seen, virtually every country's ever tried any sort of version of a wealth tax or any sort of get money from these people.
Absolutely.
More than they're already paying. These people are mobile. They're not like the rest of us. They can move, and they do move. Serena Douglas-Smith, always great to talk to you. Thank you so much indeed. A former Conservative Party leader, still a Conservative MP. Claire Pearsall, just on the tariffs and on the impact on our economy. Look, you know, I do think the Chancellor's been given a bit of get out of jail card, hasn't she? I mean, you know, we know that we don't need any help messing up our own economy. We've got the Labour government to do that, and your lot when they're in power as well, the Tories. So I mean, we don't need that much help. But this tariff war is going to hit us. Doesn't matter that we're just only at 10%. We're still going to be hit by it, and we're going to be hurting.
Yeah, of course we are, and it's going to affect the trade that we do across to America. Goods and services, the goods that we do send across are going to be at an increased cost. And I think that we're putting the emphasis onto the companies in this country who are going to struggle, and it can't be taken lightly. And I think it's something that's happening so far away that people haven't got their heads around it yet.
I wonder also, they have a load of goods that China can no longer sell at a cheap price. I mean, again, a lot of the stuff that China makes is high-level tech. It's also a lot of tat.
Yes.
You know, if you order something on Amazon as like a joke gift or something, like pool toys, I mean,
we love that.
Absolute cheap tat. And but people aren't going to pay twice the amount for it. So in America, so they're not going to order it there. They've made it. They've got the factories. They've got the workers. They're going to try and sell it all here. Are they going to cut the price? Are we going to be inundated? Will that then hit people who are companies employed here and people who are employed here because they cannot compete still with that? Again, incredibly low wage economy in China. So I think a lot of people, I mean, Mike and I go hammer and tongs on this one, that just simply aren't paying attention to actually the massive impact of this. And again, it depends if it's short term or long term, but we don't know. No. Anyway, 10:46 is the time. A little bit later in the show, we are going to be talking about the Birmingham bin strikes. Going to talk to a local councillor there about how they could actually spread to other cities around the country. I do not know how you are coping in Birmingham, by the way, with that. We're also going to be talking up next with Charlie Race, former royal editor of The Sun, about that case with Prince Harry. It's in court the second day today, why he's whinging about his security, but why he also didn't manage to find time to see his own father when they were both briefly in the country at the same time together at the weekend. We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk.
Just a few weeks after the transplant, the uterus was healthy enough that the patient actually had a period, and she conceived on her first cycle of IVF when the embryo was implanted. So you can't have natural conception after uterine transplantation. When pregnancies occur, they occur after IVF.
Okay.
And you can see there with that magnificent picture of the team from all around celebrating the joy that their work is finally complete with the baby that came into the world 6 weeks ago.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
very, very good morning. Welcome to the show. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 10:49 is the time. Joined right now by Charlie Ray. He's former royal editor of The Sun and joins us to talk about Prince Harry back in the news, of course, as always. A very good morning to you, Charlie.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. Now, Prince Harry has been back in the UK since the weekend. He's here for this court case, a Court of Appeal case, where he's basically challenging the latest ruling from, bizarrely, his own father's government is against basically HMG, His Majesty's government, basically calling for more security. In terms of what has been said, it's a two-day hearing, on the second day now. Do you think any convincing arguments have been made for why he does need more security? And what do you make of his barrister saying that, he and Meghan basically felt that they were singled out for inferior treatment and they had to step back as working royals?
Well, I think what his barrister has said is complete and utter poppycock, to be perfectly honest. Look, Harry was the one who made the decision that he wanted to go and live in America and make his own money. Yep. Absolutely fine. No problems whatsoever. Yep. Whatever's happened under the bridge and everything else, whatever. He cannot expect to have a gun bodyguard on standby just in case he decides to turn up here again. Now, the simple facts are that when he is here, there is a Metropolitan Police liaison officer who links in with his people and tells him whether there's any real threats or anything like that. It's the same for all members of the royal family and any other members of the government who have bodyguards. Now, Beatrice and Eugenie are not members of the working royal members of the royal family. Yeah. They do not get gun bodyguard. Prince Andrew had his gun bodyguard taken away, as we all know, for the reasons he had it taken away. But at time,
never met a paedophile he didn't like. There we are. Yeah.
No. No. And his own brother paid for his security for a time, and then thought, "Hang on a minute, this is a waste of money. You're going to have to pay for this." So you're still earning. Well, he's not earning money, but he's still got a bit of money in his bank. Certainly a lot more than I have. Yeah. I don't know about you, Julia, but certainly a lot more than I have. Now, you look at Sophie Wessex, now the Duchess of Edinburgh. Yeah. She gets a gun bodyguard whenever she's on royal duties. Yeah. At other times, no. Same with Princess Anne.
Yeah. And they've made that assessment. Here's the thing, though. I don't think that Prince Harry is at the same risk level. I think it's a much higher risk level than a lot of those, because he is the son of Diana, therefore high profile, because he's the son of the king, and because he fought in Afghanistan. And it seems to me that the more security there is for William and Kate and their family, the more, they're too hard to target. And if you're a nutter, Islamist extremist or whatever other kind of nutter, you'll go, you know what? I reckon Harry will be a better bet, and we know he doesn't have armed guards a lot of the time when he's in the UK. Obviously, he does in America. I've got no, I hold no candle for this man and this couple at all. But I would worry that he is at risk, and the fact that this is all now public, that he often doesn't have the security, and the fact that we don't know when a terror attack's going to suddenly happen. We don't know if someone's going to try and kidnap him or kill him. We don't know.
On that point of being a terrorist possible attack, it wasn't other members of the royal family who wrote in that dreadful book that he killed 20 Taliban and practically boasted about it. Now that puts a target on his back.
No, I think the act of fighting in Afghanistan did that.
Yeah. Sorry?
I think the act of fighting in Afghanistan, you know as well as I do, there was a complete blackout for his security when he was there for 6 months. Exactly. And the moment a foreign journalist reported that he was fighting there, he had to be withdrawn from there because they knew he was too much of a target. I don't think that's changed.
No, it probably hasn't changed, but he's actually now living in one of the most dangerous, violent countries in the world. He's saying he can't bring his appalling wife and his 2 children here to this country.
It's so unsafe, yeah.
Because it's so unsafe.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. That doesn't add up at all, does it? It really doesn't.
None of it adds up. None of it adds up. And I do not believe that people like you and I and the viewers and the listeners should be paying for his security when he clearly has enough money to pay for his own security to come here. Yes, they're not allowed to carry guns. Yeah. That's absolutely correct. Because we don't want some American Hopalong Cassidy around here whipping out his gun and everything else. So it's right that he has security, but he can pay for it.
Yeah, I tell you what, though, I reckon the rate they go through money. I know that it's always borrowed private jets, isn't it? But I worry that those contracts from Netflix aren't coming forward any much sooner. Although for some bizarre reason, Meghan has got a second series of her whatever it is with Love series one. I only got 5 minutes in.
Yeah, but would you buy a £28 pot of jam?
I would not buy a £28 pot of jam. Apparently we're not even allowed to call it a jam. It doesn't meet some ruling. It has to be called something else. I mean, it's just bizarre. My view is, if people are stupid enough to buy that stuff, they deserve to be fleeced. That's my rule. Can I also ask you about Prince Harry's arrival? Because we understand he hasn't seen his father in person for 14 months now. Prince Harry arrived at Heathrow on Sunday. Charles was in London for some cancer treatment ahead of his official trip to Italy, where he is now with the Queen Camilla. We don't know if the Prince requested a meeting and it was turned down, or if the King requested a meeting and it was turned down. But either way, the two men did not meet, even though they would have been just a few miles apart very briefly. That is pretty telling, isn't it?
It is pretty telling, and I would be surprised that, given all the sort of knowledge that we can gather at times, that we did not know that someone or other had asked for that meeting. I just think Harry had asked for the meeting. I think he was quite happy just to arrive on the Sunday to prepare for his court case, which is absolutely fine. But it's another sign that his father and son are not of the best of friends.
And also, and again, I know the King has recovered very well from his cancer treatment. We know he had to take some time to relax recently. But anyone who's had a family member going through that, or a friend, those are usually the moments when you go, right, I know we've had a feud, I know we've had crosswords, but you know what, there are times when you realise, health and family are the only two things that really matter. And actually you would say, let's come back together. Yeah. And the fact that there hasn't been that rapprochement shows just how bitter that is.
Yes, it is, and that's the most telling thing of all, that they cannot even stand to be in the same room for a few minutes to say, Dad, how you feeling?
Yeah.
And I've got to go to Rome tomorrow. Fine, very much. And I assure you, if that meeting had happened, we would all know about it.
Oh, we would absolutely know. It is just very, very sad, isn't it? And again, I don't like it when people immediately go, oh, it's all down to the wife, must be the wife. But I think we've all seen enough scenarios, and we know enough about this couple that they themselves have put out there, that, she does seem to, she's isolated from most members of her own family, I think, apart from her own mum. She's isolated him from his friends, and his family. And it does seem to me just that, one of the reasons why royals, they go to the Eatons and they only spend time with the posh people a lot of the time, is because they're the only people they can trust from childhood. No, people aren't out to sell a story on them. They can just have that safe conversation. And it seems to me that he's so isolated, that just can't be good for anybody.
And when you think what he was like, he was the young cheeky chappy and everything else. He was a prominent soldier. You just mentioned earlier on Afghanistan. He did his 2 tours. He was everybody's darling. He started up the Invictus Games, well held. I was going to mention Centre Valley, but best not at the moment. But I've always believed that he should have channeled more into his charity work, because that's his forte.
Absolutely.
Not grovelling, making money. As I say, I've got no problems with him making money whatsoever, but it's the tacky way he has been making his money. That awful book, the awful Oprah Winfrey interview, the 6-part series, just to slag off his family.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to me.
And again, especially when you've said, I want my privacy. Yeah, really. Always good to talk to you. Charlie Ray, former royal editor of The Sun. Thank you for that. Interesting, Claire Pearce, to listen to that. Charlie, unlike us, actually would have known. I mean, he would have been there. I've done doorsteps with Charlie over the years. I mean, God, too many decades ago for Charlie and me to remember. You would have met this young lad when he was a baby. And it is all really sad. But again, where are you on the security issue?
It's really difficult, because I think I'm not enamoured of him. I just think, you know what, pay for it yourself if you want it over here.
He does pay for it himself, but he can't have
the armed guard. And I think that's what he's going to have to put up with. I mean, do you know what? He's made his bed.
People say, oh, well, Beatrice and Eugenie aren't at risk. I think if someone abducted Beatrice and Eugenie, with all due respect, I think they'd have them back pretty quickly.
Yes, I think they probably would.
I've got a funny feeling that would not be something you could cope with for very long. done with Prince Andrew, like taking him. You can have him back. In fact, we'll pay you. We don't even want to actually be paid a ransom. You can have him back. But anyway,
here's some cash.
Exactly. 10:59 is the time. I shouldn't make light of these things. You know what I'm saying. Really appreciate your calls. Lots coming in about the grooming gangs, inquiries being dropped. Do get in touch about that. Plenty more to come. Talk about Trump tariffs. Going to talk about Birmingham bids. You know that this is Talk.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are
Mr.
not
President, Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Really appreciate you joining me. It's just 3 minutes past 11 o'clock, and whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, it is great that you are joining us. Thank you very much indeed for your company. Lots more to talk about. Obviously, we're here for the next couple of hours. We're going to be talking more about this new wave of tariffs. They come into force worldwide. 104% increase on tariffs imposed on China. I mean, 104%, literally, they're doubling the price of goods being sent from China to America. Approximately 60 nations have seen those higher tariff rates. We've got the 10% rate that came in on Saturday. Are we going to get a free trade deal? We shall wait and see. But there's also big infighting in the White House between Elon Musk and Donald Trump's tariff and trade advisor, as we'll talk about that. But we're also talking an awful lot this morning about something more close to home, because I think you, like me, like Claire Pistol, former Conservative government advisor who's joining us, and I think every sane person knows that we care about the cost of living. We absolutely do. We care about this impact, and if this trade war is going to impact us, and it will, it's going to hurt us, not help us in the meantime. But the important thing is we care more about the safety of our children. And in fact, anyone's child more than we care about the cost of living, because there's stuff that really matters, and that is what really matters. Labour announced yesterday that it's dropped its plans for 5 local grooming gang inquiries. Now, Home Secretary Yvette Cooper pledged in January, after a huge amount of pressure when the grooming gang story exploded once again, to provide £5 million for 5 judge-led local inquiries, and they were going to take place. There was only one city that was actually named in that instance, but other towns and cities were also going to have their grooming gangs. I think it was Oldham and then 4 others. That was announced, but yesterday, Jess Phillips, the Home Office Minister, on the final day of Parliament before the Easter recess, barely anyone there, decided to announce they would take what's called now a flexible approach, offering councils alternative options such as local panels and audits, not a judge-led inquiry. This is such an absolutely outrageous betrayal of those girls who were not just victims over the last 20 years. We're talking about thousands and thousands, but also the girls who are being victims right now, today. The big concern about this, of course, this is actually because of, well, local elections coming up in just a few weeks' time, and this is an issue that massively hits a lot of the communities in areas where Labour is fighting to retain control of their local councillors. This is basically putting politics ahead of the safety of young girls. It is so beyond appalling. It is unbelievably shocking. Coming up in an hour, we're going to be talking to Katie Lamb. She's the Tory MP, Shadow Minister, who spoke in the Commons yesterday, and we're going to be talking to her after midday when she raised this issue. Claire Pissell, you were in Parliament when Katie Lamb raised this issue. Now, she didn't actually give any new information. If anyone had to pay attention, we'd know what's the awful truth of what's happened to these girls and these grooming gangs. But she, and we'll play a couple of little clips. She was making the point about, we do need a proper investigation of the people who covered these crimes up.
That's right, and by putting out the awful details again, it's nothing that we don't know. Yep. We have all read it, and it is horrendous. But putting it out there,
hard reading as a parent, though, isn't it?
Awful. It really is awful, and to hear it in that very, very quiet chamber yesterday afternoon was horrendous. But it needed to be said. It offended a Liberal Democrat MP.
Oh, did it?
It made her blood boil, apparently. Not the fact that crimes have been committed, the language that was used in the chamber by Katie
Because she did
Lamb.
say F word, and she was quoting what judges were saying, quoting the men who committed these awful crimes against children, what he actually said. Look, let's have a watch and listen, because I think it's really important to know what it was that she said when she called for basically more investigation into this issue. Let's have a listen and a watch of what Katie Lamb, the Shadow Home Office Minister, had to say.
Why have ministers refused to establish a dedicated unit in the National Crime Agency to investigate councillors and officials accused of collusion and corruption? And I am sorry to say that unit, Mr. Speaker, must also investigate police officers. In one case, the father of an abuse victim in Rotherham was arrested by South Yorkshire Police when he attempted to rescue his daughter from her abusers. He was detained twice in one night, while on the very same evening his daughter was repeatedly assaulted and abused by a gang of men. It is clear these criminals were unafraid of law enforcement. In Kirklees, Judge Marson said, "You were seen with your victim on at least 3 occasions by the police. None of that deterred you, and you continued to rape her." How, without a national inquiry, can we know how and why these monsters enjoyed effective immunity for so long? And how can we be sure it will not happen again?
All very valid questions. And she went on, and again, we've had to beep out some of the language here she gave in Commons, which apparently you were saying, Claire, oh, a Lib Dem MP didn't like the language. Oh, you don't like people saying the word. What about the girls who were victim of it? But let's have a watch and listen to what Katie Lamb said there.
The girls we are talking about, Mr. Speaker, are predominantly white. The men who preyed on them were predominantly Muslim, generally either from Pakistan or of Pakistani heritage. One of the victims from Dewsbury was told by her rapist, I quote, "We're here to all the white girls and the government." Will the Minister accept that, in many cases, these crimes were racially and religiously aggravated? How, without a national inquiry, can we understand what part these factors played?
Again, so you know the words we were beeping out. But this is the thing. I mean, she's talking about a national inquiry. Now, abject failure from the Tory government to... I mean, she wasn't in this role, Katie Lamb, but abject failure from the Tory government for many years not to actually, not this been emerging, not to actually have a proper independent national inquiry into this. We keep being told there was this independent inquiry into general sexual abuse. But that was like in council on care homes, in churches and the like. They spent only 5 days looking at the grooming gangs. I mean, they didn't touch the sides of this issue. They really didn't. So we know, I would like a national inquiry. I think it needs to be time limited, and I think it needs to be very much focused on very, very, really straightforward. Who knew what when, who covered up, who didn't act, and I want people prosecuted. End of. But the fact that the one we think of as the proper independent inquiry led by Alexis J, they didn't even hear from a single victim of grooming gangs, not a single victim. No. They didn't even hear from some of the chief whistleblowers, the Maggie Olivers and the like from Greater Manchester Police. So we definitely did something. But I'm not even that much in favour of local inquiries. But if that's what we're going to get, I'd rather a local inquiry that was led by a judge, which is what was promised by Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, in January. And now they're watering it down to letting the local councils decide what they want. But we know what the local councils are going to do. They're largely Labour. They were largely Labour when this was happening. A lot of them have Muslim councils. They have large Muslim populations. Now, again, I'm not saying that's a Muslim thing. I'm not saying that at all. The fact is these grooming gangs were largely of Pakistani heritage. They were targeting white girls because they thought the white working class girl had no value. That's why they were targeting them. They weren't Muslims. They weren't of their own heritage, their own community, and they were covered up because of worries about community cohesion, and you didn't want to make problems, and you didn't want to appear to be racist, and anyone who raised it was just called a bigot or a racist or an Islamophobe and all the like, even while these girls were still then and now still being raped and targeted. And the abuse is off the scale of horrific torture. Some of it is absolutely horrific what's going on, and it's going on now on a grand scale. We need to have this. Why is everyone so afraid of having a proper inquiry into this?
I think they're afraid of what they're going to find and how far back this goes and how many people are involved and what kind of people are involved and at what level. I think they are incredibly concerned at those outcomes, but I don't care if they're concerned, to be honest. I think we need to dig out these people from public life. Absolutely need to be in prison if they are culpable.
If you were, and I wish you were an MP, not as an advisor, but if you were an MP, like, if you thought it was people from, I don't know, your community, what does that mean? I don't,
straight on the phone, straight dealing with it. I don't care
if it was white people called Julia, or their surnames were Hartley-Brewer, I'd still want an inquiry and I still want to find out, and I want them behind bars.
Yeah, absolutely. And
if a member of my family covered up and tried to and did not stop someone gang raping and organising the gang rape of girls, I would shop them. I'd shop myself, and the authorities wouldn't do anything about it. I'd build a new patio. I'm just saying. No, I mean, I'm sorry. I don't understand why people take this view. I want to know your reaction to this, because genuinely, I was saying earlier, Jess Phillips, the Home Office Minister, who has had an amazing track record as a backbench MP, and even before then, safeguarding children and girls, campaigning against violence against women and girls. She's got into an office. I mean, she should resign rather than make that announcement, or she's happy with that announcement. Watering it down. She's basically putting politics, putting her party ahead of children's safety and children's lives. Some girls were murdered. Their houses burnt down when they were speaking up about the grooming gangs. I don't know how you can look in the mirror, Jess. I'm sorry. I really, really don't know how you can do that. I want to know your reaction. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Let's also talk again about tariffs, because these massive global tariffs hit him. And this battle, I mean, extraordinary battles going on in the White House, where we've got this sort of battle between Donald Trump and Donald Trump's trade advisor and Elon Musk, who's heading Doge. It's all got, frankly, a little bit bitter and twisted. But we are looking at huge tariffs between the two biggest world economies, 104% tariffs on any Chinese goods going to America. Goodness knows what China is going to do to retaliate there. Where does this end, do you think?
I don't know. I don't think anybody knows, because you're dealing with people that aren't predictable. So it could go any which way you like. I think that American citizens will be the ones eventually to stand up and say we've had enough. When they cannot get electronics sent over, they cannot get a new phone, they cannot get
iPhones doubling in price.
Replacement parts for their cars, computer chips, those kind of things. That is when you'll start to see the tide turn.
Yeah, and I do think, and again, I know a lot of people who are very supportive of Trump, and again, I support him when I think he's doing something right. I don't when he's doing something wrong. I know, mind-blowing, fact-based opinion. Hey, I find it extraordinary people who are just saying, "Oh, you're Trump derangement syndrome" because you don't agree with this. I don't think most of the people in his White House agree with him on this. They're largely free traders. I think there is definitely, let's talk about this hyper-globalisation. When anything can be made anywhere and shipped anywhere, you do lose jobs in Western countries, and if you're not going to replace those with other kinds of jobs, then you leave an awful lot of people on the rubbish tip of life, unable to find work, and that is a serious issue. It's happened in many of our northern and West Midlands industrial areas. It's happened in America, and I get that people like J.D. Vance, the Vice President, he grew up in the Appalachians. He absolutely gets. He saw those jobs just disappear, and again, as one of our guests pushed out the other day, the impact of the drug abuse and things like that as well, and people just seeing their lives just sort of falling away from them. We do need to do something about this, but I suppose shock tactics we'd expect from Donald Trump, although he did say he was going to do this. But there's clearly a lot of battles going on inside the White House. We learned yesterday about Elon Musk branding the trade czar to Donald Trump. This is Peter Navarro. He was branded dumber than a sack of bricks by Elon Musk on social media. He said he was truly a moron. Because Navarro claimed that Elon Musk was merely a car assembler, not a car manufacturer, when in fact he's in the top 4 car manufacturers. His cars are more made in America than most other brands in America that are American. Elon Musk has also called him, his name's Peter Navarro, Peter Retardo. I mean, this is proper playground stuff. The response from the White House press secretary in those interminable briefings, Caroline Levitt, I mean, at least we actually get, to hear from the president nowadays. We didn't hear from Biden for months on end, did we? He was hidden away for obvious reasons. She said in response, it's quite clear, boys will be boys. And we'll let their public sparring continue. They've got very different views. Now, I think it's good that Donald Trump is hearing different opinions, but clearly there is a big battle going on within the White House over this.
I think there is, and I think also this is a very male-dominated White House. And I don't think...
You think women can't do insults? Come on.
Women can do insults better than that. So, Elon, if you're asking, Julia and I have got a whole bunch we can lend you.
Happy to play.
Exactly. But I do think that this is the butting heads of individuals with quite large egos.
Yeah.
And we're going to see more of it. 4 whole years of this we've got.
Well, it's probably more interesting than what we had before. Look, there are economic situations we're facing here as well. The government is apparently considering nationalising British Steel. There are fears growing that the company's blast furnaces in Scunthorpe could run out of raw materials within days. The Chancellor has tried to reassure workers at the Lincolnshire plant that government would consider nationalisation if necessary. Of course, it's owned by the Chinese. It was always a good idea to sell our virgin steel works to China. I mean, again, always insane that. But because this 25% tariff on American imports of steel, that's had an impact, obviously, and on our imports of steel as well. But British Steel said its 2 blast furnaces at Scunthorpe are no longer financially sustainable. There are 2,700 jobs, but of course they block other jobs. But the key thing is we need to be able to make virgin steel. There's some eco plant, isn't there, in Wales? But basically, that's not virgin steel. That's basically you can convert steel that already exists. We may be seeing God knows what kind of war going on. Russia, China. We don't know what's going on. We need to be able to make our own steel.
Yeah.
If nationalisation is the answer, then it's the answer, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm never normally in favour of nationalising things. I never think it works. But actually, in this instance, I can see massive benefits to us.
We need to protect some of our vital... That's why tariffs have a role. Again, you protect vital, defence, industrial output and agriculture. I mean, it makes sense. Also, and we talked about this about an hour ago with Sir Duncan Smith, the UK capital has dropped out of the top 5 wealthiest cities in the world. We've lost more millionaires than anywhere other than Moscow, which is under economic sanctions, for goodness sake. We lost $11,300 millionaires over the past year. That included 18 millionaires worth of more than $100 million and 2 billionaires. Now, a lot of people might say, this is, by the way, a study for conducted by the advisory firm Henley and Partners for New World Wealth, basically saying these are people, they haven't just bought a property that's gone up in value. These are people who've got that kind of cash in their bank accounts and in their stocks and shares. They are seriously wealthy individuals, and they've chosen to up sticks and leave their homes here and go and live elsewhere. A lot of people say, well, you know, sod off then. No, not our problem. We don't care. We don't run the country for the wealthy. The reality is, though, the top 1%, and these people will be in the top 0.0001%, the top 1% of people in this country who are earners, they pay 30% of all tax. Yeah. We need these people, and even if they pay a rate of tax you don't think is high enough, the reality is when you put the tax up on these people, we know this because it's happened in lots of countries that tried it, they leave.
It's no surprise, is it, that these people are mobile, they pay an inordinate amount of tax already, and the majority of them quite happy to pay the tax in the country. This is now a bridge too far. They can go elsewhere. Why wouldn't you if you're going to protect your own income?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just not rocket science.
I mean, it's no different. You get people who say, we're moving to Australia, we can have a bigger home, we can, you know, we're moving here or there, we've got nicer
more
weather.
dollars in our pocket.
And we're better off. Like, that's what the rich people do, but they're able to do it much more easily. They already have homes in 5 different countries, and they go. And even if we don't get as much tax as we'd like them to pay here, we're still getting more tax than most of us pay. Again, reality check, everybody. If you're earning less than about 45k a year, you're not even a net contributor while you're earning. This is the thing, in terms of the public service you get, doesn't mean your job isn't worthwhile. You're cleaning the streets, bin collectors in Birmingham, you're doing a more worthwhile job than I do. I will always accept and acknowledge that. But the point is, in terms of money in and money out, what you put into the pot and what you get out of the pot in terms of your healthcare, education for your kids, street cleaning, whatever it is lower. And once you're retired, it's definitely lower. And we need to have the billionaires and the millionaires here because they pay for us. Yeah, they do. They pay. That's the reality. I'm not like on my knees to them. I don't want to be saying like we don't have to pay anything. But if you try and charge them too much, they get the hell out.
Well, of course they do, and we do need those people also for the view of London on a world stage. I know London isn't the centre of the world before everybody gets really angry.
Yes, it is.
We need them for our own national standing. We now look a joke because all these people are leaving, going, it's not worth staying in the United Kingdom. So how does that
Well, to me, it also
business?
says something to our young people. We were talking again about this on the show yesterday, that it's really important to me that our young people feel that, you know, we've always got people from the third world who want to come here. I want our young people, I want our brightest and our best. I want the brightest, the best of the world to want to come here. This is a place to thrive, to set up. You can have a wonderful home. We have good schools, good hospitals, you know, great thriving culture that you can set up a business, you can do well, you'll be rewarded, you'll be valued for it, that people feel safe on the streets. I want us to live in a country where people want to stay here and they feel that they've got a future here rather than feeling, I think I'm going to go elsewhere because I've got a future. We don't want to lose our brightest and our best. We want to keep them here, and we need to have a thriving capital. I want thriving Birmingham and Manchester and Glasgow and you know and Liverpool. I want everywhere. You know, we can do it. We've got the brains. We've got the ability to do that. And it just breaks my soul that we aren't delivering that. And so many people just feel like, you know. But anyway, that's me. I'd love to hear from you. I know a lot of you getting in touch. Thank you for your calls. 0344 499 1000, texting on 87222, messaging on X at Talk TV as well about the grooming gangs. And I think an utter betrayal by this government, utter betrayal, and so sneaking out this announcement, just quietly making the announcement in the Commons without hoping anyone would really notice, no outcry. Well, I'm afraid you're going to get your outcry. Sod you, we're talking about this, and so are you. So do give us a call, your reaction to that announcement that they're basically dropping their plan to have 5 different judge-led grooming gang inquiries across towns and cities in the UK. This is Talk with the Home of Common Sense.
Joe Biden also introduced very protectionist measures to create jobs in America, create green jobs in America. He said, well, government will give you a grant to buy an electric car as long as it's made in the US.
Right.
The same with other green bling and stuff. Nobody seemed to, accuse him of sort of closing down world trade. But he was just as protectionist, really, as Donald Trump.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Claire Pistol's still with me as well. We are matching twins. If you are watching us on the telly, as one of your friends has just pointed out, we are different dresses, but same colour. Yeah. But we're trying to provide the blue. If you're not watching us on the YouTube or the connected device, we're providing the blue skies that we've not got outside because it's grey out there at the moment. If you're on the Easter holes with the kids, trying to take a little bit of a break, having a little bit of a watch and a listen. Hello. It's all right. They grow up. I've got an 18-year-old. I don't have to have anything to do with any of this stuff anymore. It gets easier, folks. Don't worry. I've always loved the Easter holidays. Yes. Yours is a teenager as well. Yep. The Easter holidays when people have got young kids. Can't wait to spend time with my child on Easter holidays. As much as you love your child, by the end of it, summer holidays. Too much. That first week of September when they start going back and everyone's going, thank the Lord. I love you. You're the greatest gift in my life, but thank the Lord you are now.
Off you go.
Off my hands for 6 hours a day. We all know it. You might just think we all know it. Anyway, let's go to more important things, and we all talk about protecting our children. And it is extraordinary that the government has basically decided, they're going to water down. They won't even do a national public inquiry into the grooming gangs and why, not only what they did, but why they were allowed to carry on what they've done and are still being allowed to for so many years. But the announcement yesterday that it's going to be watered down. They're planned from 5 local grooming gang inquiries led by a judge. That's being watered down. Basically, the councils can get the £1 million each, but they can kind of do what they want with it. Why would they do that? Well, why would they do that just 3.5 weeks before the local elections? I wonder. Let's talk about this with Simon in Basingstoke. Hi, Simon.
Hi, Julia. Can I just say on your previous subject you were discussing, it's not just the super rich. I work in cyber security. I know 5 people have quit inside IR35 roles.
Oh, yeah, don't start me on that. Yeah.
The tax is so ridiculous. And to be frank, this country is immensely vulnerable, and given the threats we face, this is irresponsible behaviour.
Yeah, we need. Can I just explain with the IR35? This is basically the ruling from HMRC that basically, if you're working as a contractor or freelance, basically they can just rule and insist that the employer rules that you are a worker. You pay the same taxes as someone on PAYE, but you don't get holiday pay or sick pay or pension. You don't get anything else, but you have to pay the same taxes without the job security, which is utterly, completely, I would say, immoral. It's wrong.
It is wrong, and to be honest, it's an example of the irresponsibility of our governments, not just the Labour government, but the previous.
This happened under the Tories,
because this plays into the grooming gang scandal as well, because what the decision the government has made yesterday is so irresponsible and politically dangerous. They already have a reputation as Sakir Starmer, two-tier care, and this is just cementing that. And to be honest, you have that, and then you have an economic crisis, which is going to happen because you're going to lose. If you lose half of the top taxpayers in this country, then that's probably something like £70 billion we're going to lose on income tax. That's a huge gap. There's no way the government can tax us enough to replace that. So they're playing with fire, and they don't realise how much they're resenting.
Yeah, and they talk about, again, we heard all the stuff about worrying about community cohesion. Look, don't raise this issue. That's what Maggie Oliver and all of the victims who raised these issues. So they were told, don't want to damage community cohesion. What damages community cohesion is the idea that you have two-tier justice, and that if you're a white paedophile and an abuser, you should be prosecuted and should be covered up. Yeah, I know there have been cover-ups, but that was because people were, again, we were appalled by that in the church, in local council care homes and things like that. Everyone's appalled, but no one was worrying about community cohesion. These gangs have been allowed to continue and perpetrate their awful crimes because well, it's too politically difficult to tackle them. I mean, as you say, that is a tinderbox. If we have, if things go really bad economically, that is a tinderbox that just waiting to be lit.
Well, can I put a counterfactual? What if the roles were reversed?
Mm-hmm.
If it was a systematic, literally hundreds of cases of groups of white men systematically abusing Pakistani underage children?
Yep.
Would the government be responding in the same way? No, they would not.
Exactly.
We would be seeing this every single day on the news.
Yeah.
And the British people, there's one thing that I think is truly unacceptable to us, is our concept of fair play.
That was exactly the phrase I was thinking. I think we have a really strong sense of that in this country, and it's one of the reasons why we don't have revolutions and things, and we take part in elections, we wait to get the right result. I think that's so ingrained in our psyche.
It is, and to be frank, I think they underestimate. I've never known a government be this unpopular this quickly. Yeah. I've yet to meet anyone who thinks they're doing a good job.
It's the one thing they're good at.
Yeah, and to be frank, there is a short step. There is a very short step. Think back to 2011. A young man commits suicide because his car is taken away from him by the police in his country, and that begins the Arab Spring.
Yeah,
and that resulted in revolutions. It resulted in the Syrian civil war, a military coup in Egypt. And Europe is in exactly the same position.
That is a really, really good point. You just don't know when things are going to change. Absolutely. Simon, it's such an interesting call. Thank you so much for calling. Do call again. Phil is also on the line. He's in Hull. Phil, you want to talk about grooming gangs too?
Yes. Honestly, I'm lost for words. I've never been so ashamed of a government in my life. Mrs. Bowles, who made this statement in January, didn't even bother turning up.
Yeah.
Jess Phillips, for the modicum of respect I had for her, I think she's a disgrace. And I think the only one who comes out with any credit, although it's a horrible thing to say, was the Conservative girl.
Yeah, Katie Lamb. We're going to speak to her in half an hour, yeah.
And I would recommend that anyone who thinks to know about this grooming gang syndrome, that I thought I knew about it, if you can hear those details without your stomach churning...
Oh, Tommy.
I just found it absolutely disgusting. And if anybody thinks that any local authority is going to vote for anything that affects them, i.e. turkeys for Christmas, they're mistaken. The £1 million will just vanish.
Yep.
Everybody should be compelled to give evidence, and if they have to build 10 jails, everyone involved should be put in jail.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. And I don't know anyone who doesn't think that, so why isn't it happening? But again, it should have happened under the Tory watch as well. I'm an equal opportunity critic on this.
Not absolving them from anything, but keep referring to the J report. They didn't speak to anybody.
Yep. I know.
And then you get that Liberal Dem spokeswoman. Oh, my God, they must be desperate if she's their spokeswoman.
Phil, thank you. I think you've spoken for a nation. Phil and Hull, thank you very much indeed. 11:33 is the time. Up next, we're going to be talking to a former detective who spent 15 years in child abuse investigations. We'll talk to Jonathan Taylor up next. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Thank you so much for joining me. Claire Pearce also here. She's a former Conservative government advisor. Let's talk now, again, more about these grooming gangs and the decision by the Home Office to basically downgrade and downplay, water down their plans for £5 million to be spent on 5 local councils. Only one was named, that was Oldham. They announced it in January, basically after just a huge demand for there to be a national public inquiry. This was like, you know, the sop they gave us to quell national concern about this, and now they've even dropped that, basically, the local authorities to get the money. They can kind of choose how they spend it on a panel or this or that. But you've got loads of local councils, largely Labour councils, a few weeks before local election, basically being told, you know, yeah, you no longer have to have a massive inquiry into what the hell went wrong in your local area. Well, how convenient, some of us might say. Well, let's talk about this with Jonathan Taylor. He's a child safeguarding consultant. He's a former detective, worked for 15 years investigating child abuse cases. A very good morning to you, Jonathan.
Good morning, Julia. Good
Thank
to
you
speak
for
to you.
joining us. Just first of all, what was your reaction when you either saw the footage in Parliament or read the reports that the Home Office was dropping plans for these 5 independent investigations?
I was amazed, but can I say not surprised, having spent so many years in that field, because the detectives, the social workers, everybody working in this area get let down.
Yeah.
You know, there's quite a lot of power that the people actually at the coalface have. And you look at even the recommendations that came out from Alexis J. I looked at those and thought, well, they're in place. You've actually got the people doing the work. What you don't have is the support coming down from on top.
Yeah.
Because there's been a lot of people, has to be said, over the years, who've actually probably done a few little things in these areas that they wish they hadn't done, and they can be quite easily found out. So perhaps not surprised, but very, very, very much let down for the victims.
In terms of, I mean, we're going to talk to the MP who's the Tory frontbencher who was speaking in Parliament. Some very powerful words, and you know, we haven't been able to play everything she said because we have to beep things because the language, she's quoting some court reports about the attitudes of some of these abusers. But one of the things that, you know, she talked about is how often the authorities, including the police, were aware of what was going on. She mentioned at one point, she said, talked about the case of Anna from Bradford, who was in residential care at the age of 14, clearly a vulnerable girl. She said she made repeated reports of her rape and abuse to her social workers who were responsible for her. So again, wasn't that no one was told? And again, we know about all these cases over the years. They tell their social workers, they tell people in position of trust. The following year, age 15, she married the man who was her abuser, far older than her. She married him in a traditional Islamic wedding ceremony, and far from stepping in to stop it, her social worker was a guest at the wedding. Again, we already knew this, but it's shocking. It's still. The authorities then arranged for her to be fostered by her abuser's parents. The ringleader of the Rochdale rape gang was then employed as a welfare rights officer by Oldham Council. I mean, institutionalised rape to all intents and purposes. She's also talked about how the father of an abuse victim, and we heard about him before in Rotherham, he was arrested twice in one night by South Yorkshire Police when he attempted to rescue his daughter because she was being abused, gang raped in a house, and he tried to rescue her, and it was him that ended up being arrested. And that extraordinarily, on 3 occasions by the police, that the man, the paedophile, you know, was the grooming gang leader, was seen with this young girl, you know, and by the police with her, and the police did nothing. What happens in those scenarios if a police officer sees something or is made aware of a crime, when nothing comes of it? What happens behind the scenes for that to happen?
You've got an array of things there, and I go back to the investigations that I carried out, and obviously I try to put myself in those positions.
Yeah.
And when you've got a victim, what that victim wants straight away wants to be heard.
Yeah.
It's not a question of being. I took away. I used to say to my colleagues, don't sort of stand there and say they don't want to be heard. Listen to what they're saying first of all.
Yeah.
Now, what you have in this situation, because I dealt with 15 years worth of investigations, and I then went into the online world of grooming. What was happening here? If I say the early days, Julia, it was a lot of people said, well, this is too unbelievable to happen. This is a bit like the Jimmy Savile situation. that there's no way this can be happening in Ira. No, it must be because she's a detention seeker, the victim's an attention seeker, and all this sort of thing. Now, I can honestly say all the people I work with, we never sort of went through this, but of course they've gone through. These might be smaller forces. They didn't probably have the same sort of training. Certain names would have come up. Some of these people, even the company directors of these taxi companies, that they were named, oh, hang on a minute, they're high not only in politics but in their local surroundings.
Because a lot of it was mini cab offices, and it was local kebab shop owners, things like that. That's how they were sort of getting these girls and ferrying them around.
Yeah, and what you've got a situation is where, so these victims come forward, they're young girls, they're probably known to the police in the sense of runaways, they're probably known, there's an element of vulnerability.
They're troubled, they're drinking, they're on drugs,
And then you've got the situation that these officers, and you've got obviously social services, social workers, they then worry, even in those days, of being called racist. Oh no, you can't say that. So you do have that. And then when you bring up to date, you think to yourself, wow, we've got 45 to 50 cities in the UK where there are hundreds of victims who go back over these years and say, this happened to me. So what you've just said, Julie, is quite correct. What you know and I know and the public know, there has been cover-ups. Now, that's a strong word to use, but there have been cover-ups. This even includes the likes of Keir Starmer when he was part of the CPS in the early 2000s, rather. So you've actually got a situation where no wonder the powers that be don't want a public inquiry, because people are going to have to swear on oath to say this. Now, I can guarantee it won't just be people like me or people like Maggie Oliver who are happy to stand up and say, well, that happened. I could tell you it happened. I was under pressure not to do anything as a detective, and I know that that's what's going to happen. And, you can think, well, is there any government that wants that to happen? So when it came to this, one thing that struck me, Julia, was when I watched Jess Phillips talk, she read everything.
The Home Office Minister yesterday, who's supposed to be there for safeguarding for victims, safeguarding women, it was shocking.
I just got the feeling what she was actually reading, she was ashamed. If you watch the video of it, and I think that her as a person, she's thinking, I've done so many promises here, I'm letting people down.
She should have refused to do it then, shouldn't she? Because otherwise, what's the point? There'll be that view that people go, well, it's still better that I'm in government and not someone else. Well, no, the point is you're in government because of that campaign you've done. And if at the point when it's your career or that the safety of those girls, you choose your career, that tells you something.
And what worries me now, I mean, I'm out of law enforcement now. What worries me now, it's still going on. You've still got individuals who are blind-eyed. Now we've got this word being cancelled because obviously social media. I mean, 25, 30 years ago, we didn't have the social media. Now you've got it. And so you're going to end up with a lot of people making these decisions because they're so worried about their own future. And it's such a worry.
Well, exactly. And we saw it again. You say you go back to Jimmy Savile and the like. And I understand again, right, early on, but then once it became aware, everyone was going, well, hold on a minute. And MPs were talking about it in Parliament quite a long time ago. And then they were basically being told, shut up or your career's over. But they were campaigning as much as they could. When you as a police officer or a social worker or someone at a local council and they're concerned about this, and again, we've spoken to Maggie Oliver many, many times, who basically had to quit Greater Manchester Police to campaign on this issue, a magnificent woman. But when you're under pressure to kind of just, shut up, Jonathan, shut up, Maggie, can you just make this go away? Or is it explicit? Is it someone calling you in their uniform and going, right, I need you to go away and forget this ever happened because I've got councillor blogs over here worried about losing funding from this particular community or votes or whatever it is. Is it explicit or is it just you get a feeling or just how explicit is it?
It depends on the weight of evidence. Let's say so. So obviously the last bit you said is just a feeling. So there's nothing there. Nowadays we've got the CPS sort of involved. You've got to get permission. But if you go back to what your point there about in smaller forces, without a doubt, because you've got this expression, you've got the constable, the sergeant, the inspector, chief inspector, then up to superintendent. A superintendent in many of the smaller forces is like God. And it's something like, for me, the Metropolitan Police, there where the superintendent was quite far more proactive in many ways. So my investigations, thankfully for me, the investigations I carried out, we were like a family. We all supported each other. I felt for a lot of these young, smaller forces and these smaller offices, whereby They would go to somebody with no experience at all, and may well be. I mean, I'm going to throw this in, which people might not like. What do you remember, Julie? Don't go back 20, 25 years. All those issues have got the Masonic Lodge.
Yeah.
Because you've got this will come into it, and of course, in certain county forces, this is what there would have been pressure. So I think, without a doubt, the constable who would have been young in service would have probably taken the report, taken the allegation, gone in and said, no, that hasn't happened. Don't worry, no crime it, or just say no further police action.
Move along. Yeah.
And it's far too easy to do.
That's the thing. And again, people don't want that to come out. Really good to talk to you, get that background. Jonathan Taylor, was a former detective, spent 15 years investigating child abuse. Claire Pearsall, just a word on that. And these things can often be very subtle, can't they? And people often, they're good people trying to do a good job, but they're too far down the pecking order to make a decision. But we need heads to roll at the top.
Yeah, we absolutely do. And I think that's why the government are probably a little concerned about having any kind of inquiry, because
Labour councils largely.
Absolutely, and these are all going to be trade union members. These are all going to be people that know each other in tight-knit communities. You can see that it's not going to be popular.
Yeah, but again,
they shouldn't care.
No, exactly. Putting your party ahead of children. It's not even like long distance past. It's what's happening now. And if you don't tackle what happened in the past, you can't learn the lessons for now. We definitely ain't learned the lessons for now. 11:46 is the time. Do keep your calls coming in on this. 0344 499 1000. We are going to talk to the MP. Just magnificent words in there as Commons. Every now and then, but there's new stuff like Elon Musk getting involved. I have to say, Charlie. I'm going to credit here. We're at Talk, but Charlie Peters on GB News has spent years investigating this. Fantastic young man doing a fantastic, really, really amazing job exposing a lot of this. Often the only reporters sitting in a court case, these grooming gangs again and again. And I'm a massive admirer of his work. And it was his stuff that was retweeted by Elon Musk, and that exploded it again. And actually, a lot of the information, those of us who've been following it for years, and yes, we have been following it for years on this station and covering it, and that wasn't new information, but it gets to a wider group of people, and that's when you get the outcry, and that's when you get action. It's the same with the post office scandal. Yeah, there was nothing new. I've done many interviews on the post office scandal before that Mr. Bates versus the post office ITV drama, but that's what made it real for people. And there are points, as we know, when MPs suddenly decide to act, and the fact that the government got bullied basically demanding for those grooming rape gang inquiries, and now they've backtracked because they reckon it's all gone away. Well, it ain't going to go away, not if we've got anything to do with it. 11:48 is the time. Up next, going to talk about Birmingham and bin strikes and why it might be happening in your area very soon too. This is Talk.
Joe Biden also introduced very protectionist measures to create jobs in America, create green jobs in America. He said, well, government will give you a grant to buy an electric car as long as it's made in the US.
Right.
The same with other green bling and stuff. Nobody seemed to, accuse him of sort of closing down world trade. But he was just as protectionist, really, as Donald Trump.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 11:51 is the time. Let's go straight to my next guest. He's a Conservative councillor, Shadow Cabinet Member for Finance and Resources at Birmingham City Council. His name is Councillor Marion Jenkins. Very good morning to you.
Morning,
Thank you for joining us now. It's talking about Birmingham, so we know what it's talking about, and it is about the bin collections that just are not happening. On and off bin collections since the start of the year, but for the last few weeks it's been no bin collections at all. We've seen the awful footage of just bags of rotting food and just piling up in streets. People just go, well, we're just going to dump all our rubbish here and, well, sod the poor person who lives opposite it and is just going to have it, smelling outside their home. Is there any end in sight to this row between the bin collectors, their union, and the council?
Yeah, there's currently 21,000 tonnes of rubbish estimated to be on the streets of Birmingham. No, the dispute has been going on for some time. As you say, for the last couple of months, it's been an all-out strike. And it appears to be an intractable problem for Labour in Birmingham to solve it. And I don't think things are helped by the fact that half of the cabinet in Birmingham are members of Unite, and yet the council is in dispute with Unite.
And the Unite union is representing the bin. Now, their argument is bin men, and it's largely men, have been asked to take a 30% pay cut because Birmingham Council, of course, is in terrible financial straits. An awful lot of services being cut, council tax going up very high. Have other workers been asked to take that sort of pay cut?
No, it's somewhat more complicated than that, Julia. It goes back to the last bin strike that took place in 2017. When the then Labour administration agreed some certain benefits for a group of workers. And at the time we said, if you do this, you will create an equal pay dispute further down the road. We were ignored, and now here we are seven years later with exactly that pay dispute. And it all goes back to the problem of legislation put in place during the end of the Blair era, which meant that you could compare the pay and benefits of people doing quite different jobs.
Yeah, I always said this was absurd. It was crazy. And again, it was the idea. Absolutely. So dinner ladies, only largely did. The whole thing was it was horribly sexist because the jobs that women were doing were lower paid than the jobs that men were doing, even though there was no bar on men being dinner ladies, for instance, or working on the tills in a supermarket, or women being bin men or working in the warehouse. It just happened there was largely a gender divide. I would have thought for most sane people for rather obvious physical reasons. But these court rulings since have basically said, oh, it's the same work of the same value and they should be paid the same. But of course, there's an awful lot of women apparently don't want to work the early hours of the morning with a load of rubbish in the rain. They'd rather work in a building. What a surprise. So they don't get paid as much. Now, the thing about this is it's not just happening in Birmingham. There are plenty of other councils where this could also be a problem as well, that they're also going to be facing this issue. And that means this is going to be an issue for a lot of other councils. I mean, Brighton, Sheffield and Barnet are just three of those that have been mentioned. And so this bid to sort of recoup some of these costs, and therefore the bin strikes then happening with the unions, it could happen anywhere, couldn't it?
It could. I mean, I don't know the detail of what's happening in these different councils, but what's important to understand is that the situation is uniquely bad in Birmingham because of the incompetence of the Labour administration. As I say, this problem was created in 2017, and we predicted it would happen. And now here we are. We have an equal pay claim. The way to address it is that you have to put a formal grading scheme in place.
Yeah.
and we said in 2017, you have to put this scheme in place. All these years, Labour have failed to do so, and they had a deadline to now do it by the 31st of March this year, 2025. Yep. The deadline has come and gone. They've missed it. And professional opinion is that every month that they fail to put this grading scheme in place, the costs could run up by as much as 14 million per month.
And the
on top
grading
of the 760 million we've already estimated.
The grading scheme would ensure that you understand that some jobs will pay more than others, and it's nothing to do with being women or men. It's just simply the quality of the job and the hardship of the job.
Exactly so. Although we conveniently call it equal pay, it's not really equal pay in the sense that we conventionally understand it. It's about this legislation, as I say, that goes back to the Blair era, which caused all this problem.
Absolutely.
And
I mean, again,
it's a nonsense. It's a nonsense.
It is an abject nonsense. And again, the equal value. Well, it's not. I mean, it's just not. I mean, again, it's just madness. You could say again, bin collectors do a rather more useful job than multi-millionaire Premier League football players who earn, absolute fortune, 100 grand, a week, rather than 20, 30 grand a year. But we're not asking for bin collectors to get the same as a Premier League football player. So it's abject nonsense, isn't it? Where does this end, though? Because how are people in Birmingham coping? Because I know there are some things you can do without, as we learnt during lockdown. There are quite a lot of people who are not essential personnel. Bin collectors absolutely are. I think a lot of people, if I were living in Birmingham, I'd be saying, bring the army in. It's not the bin collectors being on strike. This is a health necessity, quite apart from anything else. We're going to have diseases spreading. We've got rats the size of not just cats but dogs. We're now being told we need to clear the streets. They need to be safe. And we need to bring the army in and remove the rubbish.
Well, yes, I haven't seen one of these rats as big as a cat or a sheep yet, but I mean, certainly they're getting
big as a horse. They're getting bigger every day.
They're getting bigger every day. Yeah. Look, before we bring the army, there's a few things that we've recommended that should be done. Yeah. Firstly, we should make absolutely sure that those people who want to go to work can go to work. Yeah. And whilst it's fine for lawful picketing, they shouldn't be allowed to obstruct people who want to bring the trucks
or
out
intimidate,
to collect the rubbish. Intimidate.
And we have seen that when some bin workers were working, they were then obstructed from getting into the dumps.
Exactly so. So that's the first thing that needs to be done. We need to place a deadline on the offers that have been made for the striking binmen, and they have been offered terms in the sense that what happened in 2017, Labour created this intermediary grade 3. Which now they have to take away in order to stop the equal pay claims. Yeah. And so the drivers have either been offered the opportunity to take a grade 3 elsewhere in the council, they can do extra training and get promoted to a grade 4 driver, or other things.
They're trying to work around it. But there's no deadline, so they're just still out on strike. I mean, they can still be out on strike at the end of the year. I mean, we've seen this. I mean, it's happened in other countries. And I just think it's untenable for the people, the good folk of Birmingham, to deal with this. I mean, unfortunately, they don't. Well, even we're allowed to talk about it. They don't have local elections coming up next month, too. They can have their say on it right now. Lucky Birmingham Council, I would say. Appreciate you joining us, Councillor Myrion Jenkins. He's a Conservative councillor at Birmingham City Council. Thank you for that. Claire Pearsall. I mean, I don't know how people cope. It's bad enough having our bins only collected once a fortnight round my way.
Yeah, see, ours are collected once a week.
Ooh, she's fancy. She's fancy.
But the thing is, it's going to cause disease. And
there's a reason why we had bin collections.
Exactly. The cleansing of the street. And it is the street cleansing department and refuse collection. That's what they call it these days. That's what we need. But I also want to see rats the size of, sheep, dogs, house, whatever they are. I want to see that. But we need...
Not on my street.
Not on my street. But I think that this needs to be dealt with quickly. We can't have another week of this, let alone another month.
I don't understand where these things... And again, it is the local people who are suffering.
Yeah,
it really
absolutely is.
Send in the army. We send them in for everything else. Why not? It's coming up to the top of the hour. We're going to get the latest headlines. We're going to be talking to that Conservative MP and Katie Lamb, who made those extraordinary statements in Commons yesterday about the grooming gangs. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. So appreciate you joining me, whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, or whether you're watching on YouTube or your connected device. If you are watching, you may have spotted that Claire Pearsall, my former Conservative government advisor, guest today, and I have come as twins in the same colour. We are providing the blue skies that are not out there, out the window. But Claire joins us, and thank you very much, Steve, for being with us throughout the show. Talking today, up next, we're going to be talking to Tories shadow Home Office Minister about Labour dropping their plans for 5 local grooming gang inquiries. We're also going to be talking more about Donald Trump's new wave of tariffs that come into force worldwide. Early hours this morning, UK time, a staggering 104% increase imposed on China. Approximately 60 nations have been hit with higher tariffs. We already had that 10% tariff hitting at the weekend. The countries, about 60 of them, are seeing higher tariffs. EU, of course, seeing 20%. Other countries ranging from 50% up to the whopping great, as a doubling basically of tariffs, of the price for it in terms of a tariff on China. It means that literally you've got a good that is worth $10 that is imported to the United States from China. They're going to be paying $20 for it. Well, if you don't think that's going to affect price rises around the world, then think again. We'll be talking more about that. Plus, going to be talking about the Crown Prosecution Service being accused of resurrecting the offence of blasphemy. This they're doing through the back door after charging a man for burning the Quran outside the Turkish consulate back in February. We don't have a blasphemy law. Why would it be illegal to do that? Plus, councillors on Dacorum Borough Council in Hertfordshire have decided to reject a plan for a military parade to mark the 80th anniversary of VE Day in May, claiming it is, I kid you not, too elitist. What on earth is elitist about celebrating the greatest military victory of thankfully, some of our great heroic older people's lifetimes? Absolutely extraordinary. We'll talk more about that. Right now, let me introduce you once again to Claire Pearsall. Claire, I mean, again, we've talked so much in the last week about tariffs, so much about tariffs. But I think a lot of people still don't feel like the impact of that is going to be felt by them. Interesting poll the other day saying more than half of Brits want the UK government to impose counter tariffs back on Donald Trump of 10%. Of course, just getting into a trade war with Donald Trump ain't going to work out. But of course, the cost of living will be affected. But as we've been saying throughout the show, actually a lot of people are more concerned about stuff that actually happens here and worried about the safety of our children with the grooming gangs.
Well, that's right. I mean, the cost of living crisis is ongoing. So for most people, it's not going to get any better anytime soon. But this has been a national travesty for some time. These individuals have been allowed to get away with grooming and raping young white girls.
Because they're young white girls.
Because they're young white girls, and they were disposable items, and nobody picked them up on it because they were from largely Pakistani communities.
Yeah,
that's what it is. Those are the facts.
It is simply that, isn't it? Well, we've been playing you clips of Katie Lamb. She's a Conservative MP for Weald of Kent, and she is also Shadow Home Office Minister, speaking in the House of Commons yesterday after that announcement from Home Office Minister Jess Phillips that the government was dropping plans for grooming gang inquiries in 5 towns, including Oldham. 4 others haven't been named. These were 5 local inquiries, £5 million in total would be given to them to have these judge-led inquiries, not a national inquiry, as many have been calling for. They were announced by Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, way back in January amid the outcry after Elon Musk massively exploded the publicity around the ongoing grooming gang issue. But yesterday, just the last day of Parliament before the Easter recess, very quietly slipped out this announcement, probably hoping no one would notice. Well, they certainly did, particularly thanks to Katie Lamb, who I'm delighted to say joins us now. A very good afternoon to you, Katie.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm not to point out this is absolutely not a party political point, but I thought your statement in Parliament was absolutely superb. Very, very, very hard-hitting. We've been playing clips today, having to use some beeps in some of the words that you said in Parliament, and we noted that there's a Lib Dem who was present who apparently was a bit unhappy about the language, seemed to be more unhappy about the use of the F word in Parliament than the MP was about children actually being violently raped and abused by grooming gangs when no one was willing to prosecute them. But What was so significant about that announcement from Jess Phillips, the Home Office Minister, yesterday?
So, as you mentioned earlier, the government has already rejected calls for a national inquiry and had said that they were going to do 5 local inquiries. Now, that has a load of problems in and of itself. Firstly, this has happened in 50 towns. So 5 local inquiries is going to potentially give partial answers to 5 of those towns. But what about the other 45? Secondly, local inquiries have no statutory basis, which means they can't compel witnesses and they can't compel evidence. So, of course, if you are a councillor or a council official who's been complicit in these horrible crimes and you can't be compelled to go to an inquiry, you're not going to go.
What a surprise, yeah.
Yeah, unbelievable. And of course, only doing it in 5 places means that the councils that have been the worst will say, no, we don't need one. You don't need to mark our homework. There's nothing to see here.
So the Vecchia didn't even designate, I mean, other than Oldham, didn't designate any of the other 4 towns. They could kind of choose if they wanted to.
Yeah, so the idea was supposed to be that they could apply for these local-led inquiries, but it's now been watered down even further than that. So it was supposed to be a local inquiry, and now it will be a local inquiry or other locally led work. It's just not good enough. The themes, it's not possible anyway for proper local inquiries to look at national themes, but we know that there are gangs of men, predominantly Asian, Muslim, either from Pakistan or of Pakistani heritage, who have sexually tortured over many years thousands of young white girls in this country. And without looking at everything that's happened all across Britain, how can we understand why this happened, whether it's still happening, which, if anything, I think is the most terrifying of all, and how to make sure it doesn't happen again.
And this is the key thing, isn't it? You say the national themes, but I think it's so crucial if it's not statutory. You know, we always have that trade-off, don't we? Or if we have a national public inquiry, a statutory public inquiry, everyone lawyers up. It takes years and years and years, and then we get a report in 8 years' time, and they're like, although actually often these reports tend not to be the whitewashes many of us fear they might be, because I think the evidence was so harrowing. But when people were saying for a long time, we've had a national inquiry, one by Alexis J. No, rubbish. It wasn't a national inquiry into grooming gangs. They spent 5 days on it. They didn't hear from any grooming gang victims. They only looked at one area. They didn't even hear from some of the main whistleblowers, the Maggie Olivers and others, about what was happening and why it was being shut down. So we do need to know that. But this is the key thing. No local council is going to say, yeah, we should absolutely have an inquiry into how abjectly awful, immoral, criminal and incompetent that we have been over the years. No one is going to sign up to that. Turkeys don't vote for Christmas. How significant is it that this announcement has come a few months after maybe people in government thought this issue had died down after the explosion of this in late December and January, front pages every single day, despite there being actually not very much new information, but Elon Musk exploded it on social media. How significant is this that this announcement's taken place the day before Parliament goes into recess, ahead of Easter holidays and just before local elections? Because there is definitely a theme that we know runs through this. A lot of the towns and cities where this has been happening, it is Labour councils with a large local Pakistani Muslim population where this has been happening.
So I think on your first point, it is obviously true. It's just total common sense that people who have done wrong are not going to ask to be investigated. And I think it's worth dwelling for a moment on the fact that not one person, not a single person, has been convicted for covering up this institutionalised sexual torture. Nobody has been convicted of misconduct in public office or any kind of collusion and corruption around this, even though we know from the evidence and from the stories that that's happened. You've got social workers attending the so-called weddings of 15-year-olds who are marrying their abusers. One of the rape gang ringleaders worked for the council. He was employed by the council. So we know that this has happened.
Yeah, you raised that. But he was actually employed as wasn't he in child safeguarding?
Well, he worked in
a welfare rights officer, sorry.
Yeah, he was a welfare rights officer, and then he was seconded to the local community centre. And even after he was arrested, the police didn't tell the community centre that he'd been arrested for these crimes. I mean, once you start going into it, the layers and layers of horror are almost unbelievable. But I think it is significant that it was the last day before recess. There were fewer people in Parliament. The government had insisted that they were going to give an update on this before Easter, and then it all went very quiet. Tom Crowther, Casey, who was the lawyer that they had initially said was going to lead these so-called local inquiries, spoke at the Home Affairs Select Committee last week and was pretty scathing about the interaction that he's had with the Home Office. So, exactly as you said earlier, this is not really about party politics, but it is difficult to draw any conclusion other than that the government just don't want us to look at this.
Well, I think that is the extraordinary worry. You know, it's always like saying, "Hey, Jimmy Savile, can we have an investigation into what you did?" I mean, it's just extraordinary. I've always been of the view that the people who commit these awful, violent crimes are animals, but the people who don't commit the crimes but allow it to cover it up and allow it to continue, I almost feel are even worse, because they're not so awful as the evil perpetrators, but on one level they know better than those people, that they don't view these girls as just there to be taken and raped and abused and tortured and even murdered in some cases. So they must know better, because they're not doing it themselves, and yet they cover it up. But we spoke to a detective who spent years as a child abuse investigator and as a child safety consultant now, about how these things happen. How, in your experience, people you've spoken to, how blatant is this in terms of what actually happens? In terms of, is it explicit? Will there be memos from the council saying, "Oh, don't investigate this; it'll affect community cohesion. We don't want to upset our local Pakistani voters"? Is it? I mean, it's not going to be that blatant, is it? It's going to be subtle. How are we going to get the evidence?
I'm afraid it actually is pretty much as blatant as that. So there is a 2010 report from West Midlands Police that says, we know that there are gangs of men that prey on girls that are going to school gates, but because these men are predominantly Pakistani, of Pakistani heritage, and we know that these girls are predominantly white, to investigate this much further or to press this too hard would, quote, inflame community tensions. So in an amazing number of cases, it actually is just that straightforward. But of course, you're right, there will be lots of other things that went unsaid, nothing would have been written down. But all of this just speaks to the need for this to be properly investigated, both by a national inquiry and also, I think, by a specialist unit in the NCA, in the National Crime Agency, because investigating local politicians, local government officials, and also police officers is specialised work, and it will need a specialised unit.
Indeed. And in terms of Jess Phillips, your opposite number, you were speaking in Parliament. Jess Phillips is an MP. We get on personally. Pretty much, she never comes on the show, even when she was a backbench MP. She has been a campaigner for many years. I mean, I think often Jess Phillips is more concerned with Jess Phillips, but she has been a campaigner for vulnerable women and women who've been victims of violence and sexual abuse, and for girls as well. And now in office, the fact that she has made this announcement, which will make it harder for us to stop, not just find out what happened and prosecute people who cover up and prevent that from happening in the future. How surprised were you that Jess Phillips made that announcement and her reaction to you speaking? Because she looked like she was quite bored while you were saying some of the most extraordinary facts about these cases.
Well, I think you're right to say that that Jess Phillips, the safeguarding minister, does have a long history of campaigning for the safety of women and girls and on sexual crime. But again, as I said in the House yesterday, it's not about me or her or the Home Secretary or anybody on the political side. It's about these girls and what has happened to them and what is possibly still happening to them, and about all of the other girls in this country who deserve to be protected from that. So we need justice for the past, and we need safety for the future, and we need the security in the present, that this isn't still going on. And so it doesn't really matter who is on the other side and who's saying what, as long as they're telling the truth and tackling the issue.
Well, indeed. Now, look, you've only been an MP since last July, but, it's a reasonable point to make, making all these good points. But Tories were in power 14 years. This was all known about. We were talking about it on this show. It's front page of the Times newspaper. And they never instigated a national inquiry into this, local, or national, all that time. I mean, a lot of people will be saying, well, you lot just as bad.
Well, I would sort of say the same thing to that, just as it's not about Jess Phillips, and I don't think it's about party politics on the Labour side. I don't think it's about the last 14 years either. I think this has to be about what we do now and how we take this forward. Okay. There was the Grooming Gangs Task Force was started under the last government. That's done a lot of work. It's good work. It sounds like this government has done a lot of good work with them as well.
Yeah. We had a lot of arrests of grooming gang suspects under under Rishi Sunak. That was something that he pushed, wasn't it?
Yes, very much so. And there have been more under this government as well, and we should acknowledge that too.
Okay.
It's just not enough, and it doesn't get to the root of the problem.
Katie Lamb, so appreciate you joining us. Thank you for that. She's Conservative MP for Weald of Kent, but she's also Shadow Home Office Minister. We've been playing clips of what she had to say. Clem, so you were in Parliament, you were sitting in the Commons, as former government advisor, watching that, and it was very, very powerful. She's a very good speaker. But we've had so many amazing people. Speaking on this, the victims, with the whistleblowers and others. It's just... I feel the same way about the same with Jimmy Savile, what's happened, stuff at the BBC, in care homes. There are so many people who are abusing children, so many people who know about it and do nothing, so many people who know about it and try to do something who are fobbed off, and we never, ever, ever seem to stop that from happening, and there never seems to be any punishment other than eventually possibly being named and shamed for the people who fail to act. That's got to stop now.
Yeah, absolutely does. We have some brilliant voices out there, as you say, and members of the public and members of communities who put their case so passionately and are ignored. Why are we allowing that to happen? What are we going to do about it? We can't have any more lessons learned, because that's what we ultimately end up with. What we need is decisive action.
Yeah. I tell you what, one of the things often people say, well, it's men who cover these things up rather than men, and if more women are involved. You've got Jess Phillips, Home Office Minister, you've got Yvette Cooper as the Home Secretary. Sorry, guys, this is just nonsense. Look, I'd love to hear from you on this. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK in your message to 87222. Get in touch on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. I know we've got lots more messages coming in. Do want to bring you some breaking news before we go to a break, though. Claire, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. We've got those tariffs that have come in. We had the 10% tariff across the board for everybody, came in on Saturday from the US on all goods from all countries, apart from Russia, where they've got sanctions on Russia coming into the US. As of early hours this morning, tariffs on the rest of the world, which are higher than that, they've been imposed from 11% up to a whopping 104%, and that's what China is facing on any goods entering the US. We've just had in the last 10 minutes news that China has retaliated once again. They are now imposing extra tariffs of 84% on US goods. Now, of course, we've spoken a little earlier. These are the two biggest trading economies in the world. Far more goods go from China to America. It's a much wealthier country. They buy more goods. China producing things much more cheaply than go from America to China. There's a lot of talk about tariff war, even to the extent that they would ban American films coming into China. I mean, again, I'm not quite sure the Chinese people were very happy about that, given the most big good films now are made in America. But basically, they're going to be imposed from tomorrow. Those additional tariffs. We are in just an upgrading. They're just ratcheting up. I could see a point when this just goes to, Donald Trump could tomorrow just basically say, right, 200% tariff. Basically, there comes a point when the tariffs are so high, there will be no point sending goods between these countries, because no one will be able to afford to make them and no one will be able to afford to buy them because they're not making a profit. What happens then?
America will be in big trouble, especially when you look at what it is that China sends over and sells into the US. And it's
the tech, it's the gadgets.
It's all of the tech. We need to all look at our security systems across the world, because I think this is going to become a real issue. The security of your nation is based upon a lot of Chinese components, Chinese technology and Chinese companies.
People should have thought that a little bit beforehand.
They should have done.
Remember they were going to give, Huawei, a Chinese company, which basically is beholden to the Chinese government. By law in China, they let them organise our 5G. We're still letting people build nuclear power stations and things.
A lot of our infrastructure is
utterly mad. And let's have the Chinese embassy just over the bridge, right in the city.
Appalling.
I mean, again, all these mad decisions. And again, people, in my view, a lot of these decisions can only be made by people who are being fully paid up by the Chinese government. I'm sorry, there's no other explanation for it. If you've got half a brain, you wouldn't allow this to happen. But here's the thing. If China can't sell to the US, are they going to be bombarding us with those goods? Do we get cheaper goods? Or when we see a trade war and those countries' economies are damaged, then the whole world, America sneezes, the whole world gets a cold. If America and China sneeze, bearing in mind, China's economy is completely reliant on that trade.
Yeah, it is.
You know, that's kind of part of the sort of the political deal with the middle classes in China.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, by the way, it helps J.D. Vance, the the Vice President of the United States, referring to America buying goods from Chinese peasants. I don't really think. If that's what he thinks about, well, they're just the Chinese working class. Is that what he thinks about the American working class? Because he came from the working class. So
yeah,
I'm not happy with that language. And I think that going around offending the Chinese gratuitously, we should be calling them what they are: military dictators and dangers to the world.
Precisely.
But don't need to insult the Chinese people who are doing their bit for their their own lives. I just think the risk of this ratcheting up and up and up is getting very, very, very risky for the world, not just economically, but I believe militarily as well.
Yeah.
Because, the whole point was that we would be trading with China to bring them into, the world. It hasn't worked. But
no,
what if they call
really
it American debt? I mean, most of American debt's been held by China as well.
And they are likely to.
I mean, American economy collapses overnight at that point.
And therefore so does ours.
So does ours. A lot of people, genuinely, a lot of people are being like, yeah, good old Donald Trump, yeah, quite right. Seriously.
No. The minute you can't get cash.
Yeah, everything you know about how our economy works right now is teetering right now. Oh yeah, and of course you've just lost a fortune off your pension since Saturday, by the way. Anyway, 12:23 is the time. We're going to go to your calls. Great calls coming in today. And again, I know we're all sane and we're all in agreement on this grooming gangs issue. So why aren't all the politicians? That's what I really want to know. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Talk.
I remember when I was in Ireland during lockdown, you had to show your health status going into fast food restaurants, and they wouldn't let you in unless you showed them a card, which basically told them everything they needed to know about your health status in that moment. It was very, very creepy. We don't want that on a general scale. We don't want that for our future. You know, the slogan I hate above all others is, if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear. I'm sorry, but the idea that we should throw open our entire lives to the establishment to prove we have nothing to hide, that is tyranny.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. 12:26 is the time. Let's get straight to your calls on. I don't know why I'm smiling, because it's a very, very, very serious issue, isn't it? We're talking about the grooming gangs, and once again we're being let down. We have no public inquiry, no national inquiry, not even the local 5 inquiries we were supposed to have that were judge-led. There won't be any possible sort of statutory inquiry, but no one will be forced to give evidence. No one's going to incriminate themselves. And which local council is going to say, oh yeah, I really want an inquiry to how useless and awful we have been at safeguarding young girls' lives and probable criminal action as well. It's not going to happen, is it? Your thoughts on this? Let's go to Martin, who is in Cambridge. Hi, Martin.
Hello, Julie. It's always great to speak to the doyen of daytime radio.
I feel this is going to go downhill from here, though. What do you want to say, my darling?
So. Basically, you have to get in the mindset of socialists and Marxists. And to them, the project trumps everything. I mean, the acquisition and power in every form, from local, national, governmental bodies, it's their sole purpose in life. They don't actually know what they want to do with it when they've got it.
Yeah.
But that is their sole purpose.
Yeah.
Can you remember that quote from Mandelson? Go out and bring in millions of people from the third world to rub the right's nose in diversity. That was 20 years ago when he said that, and they did that. And they brought in millions of people from countries with horrific morality. In fact, they celebrate child abuse in some of these countries. They celebrate violence. They celebrate misogyny and homophobia. And we are reaping the whirlwind of the...
I mean, a lot of people will be angry at what you said, but it's true. In fact, it even ties in. We talk about these largely, predominantly Pakistani heritage men coming from, either born in Pakistan or heritage who are responsible for this particular modus operandi of abuse with grooming gangs. Our next topic we're going to be talking about is blasphemy law. Again, this is Pakistan. I mean, people are routinely, facing death sentences for blasphemy. Well, that's something we've imported here. Wasn't an issue here. We got rid of that law a few years back, but now we're bringing in people from a country which has completely the opposite values from the vast majority of people in this country are here already.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've brought in these people, and they're living in their enclaves in the northern towns and all the rest of it, and they can do what they like. They are creating their countries in our culture. Yeah. Well, I want a uniculture, not a multicultural.
Exactly. And again, we're told diversity is our strength, and we're also told multicultural, multiracial. Again, I couldn't care about the racial. That's irrelevant to what people do. Multicultural. No, I'm not a multiculturalist. Our culture is superior to that culture. It's superior to pretty much every other culture on the planet because we've got a history of democracy, of freedom. I mean, we're challenged a lot at the moment on equality under the law, right to be of a religion or leave a religion or marry who you want. And I mean, these are really important values, but they're not universal. So why would we want to say to someone, come here, make your life here, but live as if you are in the country you came from? That doesn't even make sense to me.
It doesn't. It does if you're a socialist, because they have to rely on the Muslim vote, which is about 5 million people, and they vote on bloc, right? So you've got the leaders in their communities telling people where to live. Now, if you take those votes out of the Labour vote now, they have got nothing, Julia. And that is why they will do nothing between now and the next election, because they know
they're worried about it. I mean, I have to say, I get very uncomfortable when I see, like Sir Angela Rayner, who's, quite happily in her outfits in the Commons, but when she goes to visit local community leaders, who are, again, by the way, all self-appointed, and they're never involving women either, to try and get votes, and she dresses very differently. That makes me very, very uncomfortable. But what you said, again, a lot of people are very uncomfortable with that. I've got a friend who stood for the Respect Party years back, and she said how you get votes, you literally, in many of these communities where there's a strong ethnic minority vote, you go to the local imam, and you basically ask for the vote, ask for the support, promise what they want, and then they basically tell people this is who you're voting for, and then the man of the house basically controls the votes of everybody in the house. I mean, and people say, well, that's racist, it's bigoted, it's xenophobic to say it. That's what is actually happening, and everyone who pretends it's not is just lying to themselves.
It is the truth, Julia, and you have to, to find improvement, you have to accept the truth so you can work out what to do about it.
So what would you do? What would you do? What would you do right now dealing with this issue? What would you do?
Well, we need a total national inquiry. We need to stop postal votes. We need to.
I do a postal vote, though.
Well, yeah, I know, but I think it's come to the point now where I think it has become that serious, Julia. I think you need to traipse down to the local voting booth and vote. Likewise with benefits, if you claim your benefits, stop all this automatic payment.
Oh, I'm with you on that.
And you need to go down to the local post office and show your passport or whatever, and then you get your money. Because our society, Julia, and it is this serious. We are being hollowed out from the inside, both socially, moral-wise, and financially. We are dying. And if people can't see this, they need to really soon wake up on it, because we are being hollowed out.
Yeah, do you know what? I totally agree with that sentiment. Martin, thank you for your call. Appreciate that. Paul is on the line. He's in Essex. Hello, Paul. What do you want to say?
Firstly, the guy that just performed, was it Mark or Martin?
Martin.
what do I want to do? I want to vote for him. Right? That's what I want to do.
Yeah.
Get him. I'll vote for him. I had a couple of things I wanted to bring up, and these are things. I know of a number of Muslim people through business. They are wonderful, nice people by majority. And
they're no different to anyone else in that sense. People aren't defined by their religion in that sense,
No, but where are the leaders of the community groups standing up and saying, hang on a minute, we want an inquiry, we need to defend our religion, we need to defend ourselves as honourable people and get rid of these scumbags who aren't. There's none of that happening.
Exactly.
And then the councils, the Labour who are saying we're not going to have these inquiries, so they're saying they're putting their votes ahead of the lives of young people.
Yes, I think that's what they're doing.
2025, in Britain, my job as a Poxy MP at 70 grand a year is more important than the life of a young girl who's been gang raped.
Yep.
How morally corrupt is that?
Yep.
And the reason to deal with it is let them cancel the inquiry. I don't want to hear from a political leader who's going to stand up and say, we will have an inquiry. No ifs, no buts.
Well,
inquiry.
Rupert Lowe, who was a Reform MP, he's got his money, he wants to have a statutory inquiry, we'll have a proper inquiry. Thing is, unless it's got the force of the law where people are required to give oaths under risk of imprisonment if they lie, unless you're literally, you have to appear, you're going to have to give evidence, you're going to have to tell the truth, unless if you're proven to have lied, you're going to face jail. It's not worth the paper it's printed on.
My point is, if those leaders won't stand up and say we will have an inquiry, then just as you earlier, as the lady from the Conservative Party said, they are by default complicit in supporting these rape gangs.
Absolutely.
If you're not going to fight against it, you're part of it.
Absolutely. Paul, thank you for that. I couldn't agree with you more. I'm sure everyone's nodding along. Claire Bizzle certainly was.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely spot on. But unfortunately, where does that leave us? We all know that they'll be complicit in it, and we can point our fingers and we can say you're bad people. But where's the punishment?
Yeah, well, again, whichever party it is, it's not. People. Again, I think people need to. You need to vote, and you need to be very, very clear with people what you expect. I don't. I like to think that Yvette Cooper's not going to get away with this, but I'm not. Of
course she will. That's the reality.
I'm not that hopeful of what goes on. No, again, as I just mentioned, though, this weirdly kind of links to, in a way, in terms of the cultural issue, with where we are in terms of blasphemy law. We do not have a blasphemy law in this country, and yet a man has been charged for burning a Quran in this country. Why? If it's not actually an offence. If he owns the book, he's allowed to burn it, as far as I'm concerned. We're going to be talking to the Free Speech Union about that, because the blasphemy law has been brought back into this country by default when it was banned, or ended, in 2008. That's up next. Plus, we're going to be talking about why a local council has rejected plans for a VE Day parade in May. Why? Because it's too elitist. I think what they mean by that is too white. I think that is what they mean by it. I really do. The world has gone mad. We're going to talk about that up next. This is Talk.
UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good afternoon to you. 12:37 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk. Back in 2008, we saw the abolition of the blasphemy law in this country. A blasphemy law, by the way, that is only actually involving Christianity and no other religion. But for some reason, we seem to have a blasphemy law back in by the back door, partly due to threats from largely, let's face it, Islamists, violent Islamists, not Muslims, Islamists, people who follow a violent political ideology, who are basically forcing people who do not obey their religious doctrine basically into hiding, like the teacher at the Batley Grammar School who simply showed a cartoon to his pupils of the Prophet Muhammad and has been living in hiding, he and his family, ever since, some 4 or 5 years now, and other cases where we have seen people subject to violence. However, the latest case is not from a threat of violent mob. The threat is from the actual Crown Prosecution Service, who have basically brought back a blasphemy law by the back door by prosecuting a man for burning a copy of the Quran. Let's talk about this with Ben Jones. He's Director of Case Management at the Free Speech Union. Good afternoon to you, Ben. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Why on earth would somebody be prosecuted for doing something that's not against the law?
Well, it's important to stress it absolutely is not against the law, and yet this is the third attempted prosecution that I'm aware of this calendar year alone. And what's happened in this particular case is that the CPS has decided that Mr. Koskan, this individual who burnt a copy of the Quran outside the Turkish
This is Hamid
consulate,
Koskan, yeah.
That's correct, that this has caused harassment, alarm or distress against what they're calling the religious institution of Islam. Now, there is no religious institution of Islam in this country. There is certainly no criminal offence against causing harm, harassment, alarm, distress, any of these things. There is the Public Order Act, which deals with causing harassment, alarm or distress to individuals. But Islam is not an individual. It is a set of ideas. Yeah. It is not a person. You cannot distress a set of ideas. You can't harass a book or cause alarm to an ideology. So it's complete nonsense. There is no law to back this up. They're inventing it.
Well, I mean, that's what's so worrying about why they are doing so. And we did have that rather worrying question in the House of Parliament in PMQs a few months ago, where there was a call for a blasphemy law effect to be brought back in. And Keir Starmer didn't slap it down saying, no, we don't have a blasphemy law in this country. He seemed to sort of accept the principle of it. Hamid Koskan, he's 50 years old. He's denied religiously motivated harassment after setting alight a copy of the Muslim to holy text outside the Turkish consulate in Knightsbridge in central London. Now, what was his motivation for burning the Quran? And presumably, again, he's not stolen someone else's Quran and damaged their goods. It's his own Quran. He's purchased it and he is burning it, not causing a risk to anyone else. I mean, in terms of there's no physical risk to other people. He wasn't throwing it at people or anything like that. What was his motivation, as far as we know?
I think he was making two different points. The first of those was in solidarity with a man called Salwan Momika, who had burnt a Quran, was being prosecuted for this in Sweden and was murdered. The second point he was making was a protest against the Islamisation of Turkey. Now, it seems we've got a pretty serious problem with the Islamisation of the CPS at the rate at which they are pushing these cases, and with the police, particularly, it seems, in parts of northern England. So those were the points he was making. They're both completely legitimate points to make in a democratic society. This absolutely should not be a police matter. And, of course, he was attacked afterwards for his trouble, for having taken part in this demonstration, having made his point.
Yeah, indeed. And there's a very big difference, isn't there, between someone saying they think it would probably not be a good idea to burn a religious text because it could cause offence to people. But that's different between saying, I may choose not to do that out of sort of good manners, but I defend the right of anyone to choose to do that if they feel strongly about that. And he clearly feels strongly about that. He has a right to do it under our law. I mean, given that we've got enough laws that aren't actually upheld in this country when it comes to violence, when it comes to theft, sexual assault, goodness knows what. We've just been talking about grooming gangs all day and lack of charges brought. It's a bit bizarre to a lot of us that somebody who has caused no harm to anyone, burnt a book that is in his own possession, why on earth the CPS would feel the urge to bring charges like that? Do you think they genuinely do think that there should be a blasphemy law? Because if that is the case, we know it will only really apply to one religion, will it not? Because no one seems to have a problem with people being critical of Christianity or of any other religion at all. It only seems to crop up with one particular religion.
If somebody working at the CPS wants there to be a blasphemy law, they need to campaign for that. They need to stand for office on that platform, and they need to pass an act of parliament. It cannot be done through the back door. Almost 20 years ago, as you say, the blasphemy law was abolished in England and Wales. And if you look at what the CPS said in the Times, they said that we will never hesitate to prosecute cases where there is hostility towards members of a racial or religious group. Well, maybe they should hesitate. Maybe they should think about what they're doing. Maybe they really should think quite long and hard before unilaterally creating a blasphemy law in this country to protect Islam.
And indeed, this is the thing, if someone is threatening, abusive, or violently attacking somebody, whether it's due to their religious faith or any other reason, I want those people prosecuted. They're committing a crime. People have a right to look. I am appalled by anti-Semitism we see on the streets. I am appalled by people who are, and again, carrying out acts of anti-Muslim hatred in terms of threats to people because of their religious identity or their beliefs. I'm appalled by both sides. However, as you say, you can't threaten or harass an institution or an ideology or a building if you're not actually threatening to harm anyone in it or the building. That's not a thing. It's certainly not a crime. And yet these cases keep being brought. You say this is the third attempt. It sounds like they're not going to stop until they get a prosecution that's successful. The trouble with us, we in this country, we do have case law, don't we? If this is successful, it will set a precedent.
Well, the Free Speech Union will fight this battle as many times as we have to make sure that the message is heard by the police and by the CPS. And we did have some success recently with a case of an asylum seeker, ex-Muslim. He'd converted to Christianity. Ironically, he'd fled Iraq, fleeing religious persecution, only to be arrested by an English police force for burning a copy of the Quran. And we did manage to get all of the charges against him dropped. So we will keep fighting this fight.
Absolutely. Again, one of our key values in this country is that people are free to have a religion and to worship as they choose, but they're also free not to have a religion or to change religion, to marry someone of a different religion, to leave their religion. And again, blasphemy, leaving your religion, apostasy, that is actually illegal in a number of countries, but it's largely Islamist countries where that is the issue. And again, I don't want to speak like, oh, you're anti-Islam today. No, we have an issue. We need to face up to it. This is an issue and it's impacting all of our free speech. But the fact that the Prime Minister only a few months ago didn't just immediately rule out the possibility of bringing back the blasphemy law, I think, and as a former Director of Public Prosecutions in particular, I'm pretty worried about that. Are you, Ben?
Completely. And this proposal that there is going to be an Islamophobia definition put forward by the government, if it is anything like the definition that has been adopted by many other councils and public bodies, it will be a census charter. You will not be free to criticise Islam in this country.
Or even be critical of things like the burqa or the veil, which I am very, very critical of and have every right to be. It is extraordinary, isn't it? Ben Jones from the Free Speech Union, thank you very much. I'm a member of that union, so I also have to declare that. But I feel so strongly about these issues, but we have a blasphemy law by the back door already, do we not, Claire Pearsall, because of the violent threats? There are criticisms I would not make of Islam. I wouldn't show a picture of a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad as he's regarded in Islam. I don't believe there are any prophets. I'm an atheist. But only because I would like me and my husband and my daughter to stay alive. So it's the physical threats that I know are real. I know people who do that, who have to have panic buttons, who are facing threats every day to their life. So I'm afraid I want to keep my family alive. But that is a blasphemy law by the back door already. The fact that the CPS and the police are basically going along with that stuff, I think it's terrifying.
It is, and it's appalling that was the third attempted prosecution of a law that doesn't exist. Let's get that out there.
Can we prosecute some rapists?
Yeah, let's do that instead,
Some child abusers.
It's really concerning that we can look, after 16 years, to come back to having a blasphemy law again. I mean, this is just utterly ridiculous.
But who
we
wants
can't let it happen.
Who wants it?
Well, But the Prime Minister has had his opportunity to get rid of this once and for all.
I just find it. I genuinely find it. We are sleepwalking. We are sleepwalking into a very, 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 very dangerous place. 12:47 is the time, and I've got lots of calls on the board. I'm doing my best to try and squeeze one in before the top of the hour. Ian Collins coming in for 1 o'clock. Up next, though, we're going to talk about the local council that decided that they weren't going to have a formal parade of VE Day to mark the 80th anniversary of that extraordinary victory in Europe. Why? Because they think it's too elitist. Of course they do. That's up next. This is Talk.
Maybe if Labour MPs focused more on the situation in their constituencies and indeed the cities that they represent, it might be better for their constituents rather than focusing on issues in Pakistan or indeed the Middle East. I think the situation in Birmingham is absolutely appalling. If you were living in Labour-controlled Birmingham, you're seeing rubbish pile up. And there's one street which is on one side controlled by Labour, on the other side Bromsgrove controlled by Conservatives, and the difference couldn't be more stark. You've got rubbish under Labour and clean streets under the Conservatives.
UK on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Thank you so much for joining me. 12:50 is the time. Claire Pistol's still here. I know you've got a very, raised in a military family. I know the next story feels is very, very personal to you. But Dacorum Borough Council in Hertfordshire have decided that on the 8th of May there will be no formal event of any sort, no formal parade for local residents to mark the 80th anniversary of VE Day. Instead, they say you should host your own local parties. It's up to you. Do what you want. And the reason why they've decided this is because it's too elitist to hold a VE Day parade. Let's talk about this with Hugh Andre. He's Chief Executive of We Served and also a former British Army captain. Very good afternoon to you, Hugh.
Hello, Julia.
I have to say, I think this is code for, it's too sort of white. I don't like making these claims normally, but it's just sort of, this is just something that will only appeal to a certain group of people. But this is talking about commemoration, a very significant anniversary of an incredibly, probably the most significant event in the last 100 years in our country. And they think it's too elitist to mark it. What on earth is going on?
No, I know, it's absolutely ridiculous. How can victory over fascism be elitist?
Yeah.
I mean, if that local council wants to understand the meaning of elitist, perhaps they should look at what the Aryan race was all about.
Yeah, Absolutely. It is extraordinary. I mean, it is extraordinary. I mean, okay, people might want to have their own events and everything, but this is a Lib Dem-run council, I think, interestingly. They did, though, they did hold a day-long event last year called 50 Fest, which marked the 50th anniversary of the council existing, you know, and there will be other events, but I just think this is the thing. We often seem to have, and we've had schools recently marking certain events like Refugee Day, but not doing an Easter parade. And there are various cultural events, religious events in this country that have just been the norms of our lives. But this is, as you say, this is something that shaped our entire country, our entire history. This is emblematic of everything our country should stand for, our victory over fascism and the country coming together and fighting this incredibly important war for the future of our country and all of our freedoms. I can't think of anything more worth marking and celebrating and venerating.
No, and you know, and those very brave men and women who won that victory, you know, they're becoming fewer and far between now.
Yeah.
You know, and they won't be along. And you know,
this is probably the last major anniversary, the one with a zero, that they will be here. We're down to very few.
Absolutely, and you know, as a veteran and you know, someone who's lost friends as well. You know, Churchill said. Let me just read what Churchill said when that day. He said, "This is your victory. In our long history, we have never seen a greater day than this. Everyone, man or woman, has done their best."
Yeah,
that
I
was
mean,
all about
shivers.
Everyone.
Yeah, shivers down the back of the spine as you read that, about how significant that is. And again, in these days, we just talk about blasphemy, all sorts of things. There are so many people who just do not understand that the freedoms we've got right now, the values of our country, they're not universal. They were fought for. People died for them. They wouldn't exist without those people.
No, and you know, Julia, a couple of weeks ago, myself and the team from We Served were invited up to Manchester to attend an iftar celebration by the British Pakistani Muslim community up there. It was full of members of the armed forces.
Yes.
And I had to get up on the stage and say a few words. And I just wanted to reiterate, in the armed forces, whether you're black, white, gay, straight, vegan, and meat eater, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
As long as you do your job.
Yeah. And you're a comrade in arms. That's what matters. You won't believe this. Genuinely, in the last 2 minutes while we've been talking, bearing in mind this is a Lib Dem council that decided against this. Obviously, the backlash against this has been a bit too much for Lib Dem leader Sir Ed Davey, certainly ahead of local elections in a few weeks' time. I don't know whether they're taking place in this borough or not. The VE Day parade is now going to go ahead. Funny that.
Common sense prevails.
Round of applause for that, but only once it was publicised. Hugh Andre, thank you for joining us. Fantastic words from you, Chief Executive of We Served and a former British Army captain himself. Look, I believe elections are taking place. I wonder if that's one of the reasons why other parties will be standing in all those elections. But Claire, I know, you come from a military family. This stuff is really close to your heart.
Yeah, it absolutely is. My father served in the British Army in the Royal Signals, as did my grandfather and great-grandfather. And my son very proudly attends the Duke of York's Royal Military School with a bunch of kids whose parents are currently serving overseas.
And we appreciate that. My goodness, we need people to be doing that.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I'm going to try and squeeze in one last quick call really quickly about the grooming gang. So many calls on the board. Vernon is on the line. He's in Staffordshire. Vernon, we have to keep this brief, but I wanted to make sure I got you on. What do you want to say?
Thank you, Julia. It's an appalling stain on the country, this grooming scandal, lack of investigation. This is corruption at the highest level.
It is corrupt. You know what? That is the right word. It is. It's corruption, isn't it?
It's incredibly... I'm a hugely proud Englishman. This is appalling. I don't care what religion, what race, what colour you are. If you're guilty, you should be charged and you should be locked under for a very, very long time.
And it's the fact that so many people knew it was happening and did nothing about it. Like I say, that we are seeing the prosecutions of the grooming gang members now, but what we're not seeing is any prosecutions, as the MP pointed out earlier, of any of the people who allowed that cover-up to continue for so long.
Julia, the police, the councillors,
social workers,
law enforcement, they are guilty as charged, and every single one of them should be in prison, regardless. I'm staggered. It's appalling. It's a stain on the nation.
It really is.
It must not be allowed to continue, Julia.
I couldn't agree with you more, Vernon. Thank you very much. So glad we got your call in. Thank you very much. Did lots and lots of messages and tweets that I didn't get to today because we had so many fantastic calls. But again, just one from Claire. Anger. What's her reaction to that news about those local grooming gang inquiries being dropped? Anger, says Claire, absolute national disgrace, and this government again is turning a blind eye to it. Claire Pisser, your final word on all of this?
Yeah, the heads need to roll. It can't be allowed to just be swept under the carpet any longer. The Home Secretary needs to do a U-turn. It'd be the one we support.
And again, these inquiries, they don't need to take 10 years.
No.
They really, really don't. You could do this. You could do this if you really, really wanted to. You really, really could. Thank you very much indeed. Delighted to be joined now by Ian Collins, who's joining us in the studio. I just want to double check. You didn't get the memo about wearing a pale blue dress?
I've just got it. I've just received it now.
I did message you. If you all watched, you did.
You did message
Claire and I both turned up
earlier.
this morning in the same colour dress. We're trying to provide some blue skies because of grey skies outside. You're in a miserable grey jacket.
Well, blokes always wear grey or blue, don't we? Haven't got much of a choice.
When was that decided?
I don't know. I don't know. I once tried burgundy. Looked like some kind of offender.
Yeah. Did they have to check your hard drive?
It wasn't good. Yeah. 17 hours in a police cell is not much fun, believe me.
I'll tell you what, people getting arrested for anything these days. But anyway,
crimes. Yes,
anyway, what are you talking about?
We are going to pick up on this, of course, as well. The kind of great shame of what has happened.
So many people wanted to have their say on this. They're so angry about
it. It's just extraordinary.
It never ends.
I know the Tories don't come off completely lightly on this, but certainly the MP you were speaking with earlier. She's a fresh page on this one. She could reasonably argue that point.
Katie Lamb,
and I thought she was incredible what she said. And,
her words
long
in
may
Parliament.
that continue.
Jess Phillips, the Home Office Minister, her face through that was just so appalling. Just sort of, but she looked